This audio presentation of The Gentleman from Heaven by James E. Dodds is brought to you by audioenlightenment.com. Copyright 2014. All rights reserved. Verse, the one light. I saw a light in the window of his soul. I looked deep and low, its source was in me. So great am I that all men carry my light, but few know that there is only one. I, the Christ, am the light of all souls, young and old, and I shall guide them home. James E. Dodds. Who is the gentleman from heaven? Let me announce myself. Though I am not a newcomer in your world, you may not have glimpsed me or have been formally introduced to me. The permanency from which I came has no name, yet when divided and manifested as beings, it has a name. The name is self-conscious spirit. However, I am known by many names. I am that I am. I dwell in the hearts and minds of all men, regardless of time, race, or station. I am the vision, inspiration, and power of all the prophets, kindling their hearts and minds with the needed light to quicken men to my presence in the depth of their very being. Though men stray from me and seem lost in the trivialities of earthly existence, I have never forgotten them, nor released them from my abiding love. In my love all shall find security, peace, and the way to the kingdom of heaven, of which I am the ambassador. You may have heard of me. The stories of my existence and whereabouts are legion. All men worship me, though they may not know me by the name by which you speak of me. What matter by what name I am known? For am I not that which is named in all men? I therefore care not by what name I am called, as each name finds a happy response in my love. Dear friend, use a name by which I am known to you. To this I will surely answer, and give you the needed light. I am the official light-bearer for all men on earth. I am always at your service. Your sincerity is the key to my heart. My heart is a treasure chest of many jewels. When I came to your world as Jesus of Nazareth, this was but one of the many journeys to your planet as a messenger of light. I was known as the Messiah, as Emmanuel, as the Anointed One, also as the Christ, the intelligence and love of our Father, Mother, God, consciously at home in the hearts and minds of his many children here on earth. As of yore, I bring the gospel of light and of healing. I shall give wings to your mind and health to your bodies, which are my temples of earth. In my spiritual body I know only the fullness of our Father's kingdom. As above, so shall it be below in your physical bodies. Your health shall spring forth speedily. I am the singer of sacred songs in the souls of the redeemed. I am your elder brother, reminding you of your heritage, of your place in your Father's house, and at his bountiful table of eternal values. Read therefore my message, given in this volume with an ever-quickening love. It is given by one in whom I have been recognized and loved long before he took on this earthly means of expression. Through him the flame of my love in you shall be fanned to an ever-quickening tempo, reaching new heights in deep understanding and power. Being brothers in Christ, you have been called out of darkness and blind fumbling into the glorious light of the revelation of your own majesty of Christ. As Christ, you shall live in the ever-expanding consciousness of the kingdom of heaven, which is a state of mind in which you are able to have what you need where you are. Chapter 1. The Divine Becoming. The trial, the crucifixion, and the resurrection represents the great climax of the life and ministry of Jesus. So must every man experience a trial, a crucifixion of materiality, and a resurrection from all limitation, which is his new birth into Christ consciousness. Jesus came to the world bringing vital new ideas. Included in them was the message of forgiveness, of faith and freedom, and an all-inclusive love, all of which announced a teaching superior to the traditional religion of his day. The law of forgiveness brings to man the realization that it is in the heart of God to forgive man his sins or errors and have him restored to his proper place in the kingdom of heaven. This forgiveness program is one of the key ideas in the teaching of Jesus Christ. By forgiveness, we find ourselves relieved of all the weight of what we think of as our past errors. We realize that God has provided a way whereby all of these errors or sins, and error or sin is merely an untrue interpretation of that which is true, shall be annulled as though they had never been. Jesus took the position that there was invested in him the power of redemption and healing, the ability even to raise from the dead. He did rise from the dead, which is symbolic of the great truth that you and I have operating in us, the leaven of spirit, which is able to quicken us to a conscious realization of our own divinity. This leavening power of love spreads throughout our being that which is necessary in order that we too shall be purified. We too shall be redeemed. We too shall be established in the wonderful place wherein we no longer know death, where we become consciously and eternally alive, or consciously immortal. All of this belongs to us as part of the great teaching of Jesus Christ. Remember, he said, I am the way, the truth, and the life, John 14:6. Follow thou me. I am sure that he was fully aware of what he was saying when he made this tremendous statement. He knew that he was the conscious embodiment of the truth of life for man. He knew that he was made manifest in him the entire science whereby man may move freely and victoriously about their business of living. He knew man was to be changed for the better and live in a constant state of expansion and growth. Therefore he said, I am the way. By this he meant, that which I am is the way, and what I am you too shall be. You have the seed of this knowledge invested in you. This guarantees your arrival at the place where you shall become conscious of your inheritance as a son of God. You shall have the understanding of this knowledge, and you shall develop the ability to demonstrate it and consciously live the life of an immortal being. Jesus did not come to blind us with his power. He came to remind us that all that he was, we too are destined to become. Therefore, at Easter time, we celebrate the great experience which was summing up of all his teachings and all that he represented. You remember he told his disciples that he would be going away for 3 days. He prepared them for the crucifixion of his physical temple, which he knew would take place, but told them he would resurrect it again in 3 days. He kept his promise. All of this tells the correct story that God indwelling is far greater than the person we see. What we see when we look into the mirror is a person. But remember that deep within this person there is a unit of divinity. That back of this person, divinity is consciously experiencing itself. That divinity itself is living in us. Jesus knew this, and he was not afraid or embarrassed to accept the fullness of it in his immediate experience. He not only preached this, he also taught it and demonstrated it. He followed through unto the very end, demonstrating the nothingness of the power of material limitation. There is invested in man that conscious livingness of infinite goodness that nothing, seen nor unseen, can defeat. The poet gives us a line here in speaking of the rose. Yon palpitating ray thou callest a rose, thou seest light that in its bosom glows. But that which thrills behind it he alone who knows to commune with its maker knows. The person who communes with the indwelling presence of the omnipresent God within his own being knows, and in his knowing he arrives at a place of authority. He becomes intuitively self-known and speaks as one who knows. Jesus' experience were of such a nature that he knew whereof he spoke. He was not speaking from what he had heard, but from what he had experienced within his own understanding. To him it was true, and to those who had ears to hear it was true, and they followed him. Today we too need to learn of the reality of the indwelling Christ. We need a greater realization that within every being there stands waiting, fully alert and able, that power which will become active in our experience when we choose to give it the proper attention, and which will establish us as radiant manifestations of divine light, life, and power. This is our legacy. Who will claim it? Each Easter we celebrate the final step wherein death is overcome. Death is thought of as being the last enemy. Those who have read Conscious Immortality will, I feel, realize that in becoming objectively, spiritually self-conscious, they enter into the experience of being consciously immortal. Having caught a glimpse of their potential glory, they will consecrate themselves to their ever-expanding way of thinking and living. Man has had this knowledge at his disposal for nearly 2,000 years, but not having a real understanding of it, he has fumbled. Confusion has resulted. It seems strange that this knowledge should have been brushed aside and replaced by a materialistic edifice. I would say this was a temporary triumph for the forces of evil. The world as a whole, as we know, is materialistically purposed. We think we are Christians, but that is a faulty thinking. We might ask ourselves, well, just what constitutes being a Christian? In answering that, I might mention that Jesus was called the Christ. In Hebrew, Jesus Christ was called the Messiah. In Greek, he was called Christos, or the Christ. John 4:25. He was the first of the new type of man who was both priest and king. Christ was a title given to him because he had authority in ways not common to men. Later he was called a Christ, meaning one of many. For every Son of God is potentially a Christ. His immediately followers were called Christians because they followed him. They were looked upon as young Christs, persons who had knowledge of the way of being Christ. They had caught the vision and felt the nature of Christ as being natural for man, for in some measure they were demonstrating the character and nature of Christ. The Christian, then, to me, is one who in some measure is manifesting the character and nature of Christ. It makes no difference whether his name is recorded in religious institutions or how much reading or listening he has done. It is the degree in which he is manifesting the character and nature of Christ that announces the measure of his Christhood. The individual who has caught that vision can never again lend himself fully to a materialistic pursuit. He will be working for that unity which is Christ. He will be working for harmony. He will be working toward the great day which will surely arrive in the experience of the nations of the world, wherein peace will be established. Peace will never be won by force. Peace is an experience that must take place in the hearts and minds and souls of individuals. If all of us who claim to be Christians today were working for peace with the indwelling presence, there would be peace upon the earth. Peace means unity with our good rather than opposition to evil. We need a truer teaching, purer knowledge, a more dynamic spiritual understanding. We have been fighting evil instead of loving our good. This loving our good would release the resurrecting power within the individual. The Christ in you is equal in potentialities to the Christ in Jesus and to the Christ in his immediate followers. You have within you the vision, the drive, the power to demonstrate the same measure of dominion. You have everything within you, for God as Christ indwells you and is just as able in one person as in another. God is no respecter of persons, but God, in his omnipresence and omnipotence, shall move forward and become active and productive in your experience only in proportion that you lend yourself to the plan. It is far more important that your spiritual progress be established than your material progress. The individual who does not place his spiritual life first does not live happily. The individual who does give his spiritual life first place in his program will soon discover he is enjoying a way of life in which he finds himself able to meet and handle his immediate experiences peacefully, purposely, and victoriously. He is no longer concerned about his welfare, or the welfare of anyone for that matter, because he is living in the radiant consciousness of one who knows, and it is for you and for me to do these things. It is not enough that we listen, read, or declare. We have fulfilled our part only when we follow through by demanding of ourselves those inner experiences which announce to us our unity with God as Christ. Christ intelligently understood means complete security. Christ ignored is chaos. If we had not forgotten this Christian teaching, the world would be enjoying heaven on earth today. I am frequently asked the question, will we ever really have heaven on earth? My answer is yes. You as an individual can enter into the kingdom of heaven. You can so identify yourself with the indwelling Christ that you live in the consciousness of Christ, the kingdom of heaven. Jesus said 2,000 years ago the kingdom of heaven was at hand. How many people are living in it? Only those live in the kingdom who have made a business of finding it and learning how to accommodate themselves to it. You can so integrate yourself spiritually that you live in the kingdom of heaven right here today. You can enjoy the kingdom of heaven wherever you are. But unless you attend to the business of establishing yourself in it, well, don't expect to arrive. Don't ever expect anything unless to do it for you. One of their errors is that of expecting the other person or the other nation or some other system to bring about this desired end. But it is entirely an individual piece of business. You must attain that depth of understanding that gives you the sense of unity with the kingdom. This will give you the strength to walk the way Jesus demonstrated. You must be as he was and not wait for anyone else to do it for you. You must follow through. When you become objectively spiritual, you will consciously enter into a much larger experience than you ever known before. Christ, being the embodiment of all virtue, is consciously omniscient and omnipotent, and represents the one power capable of establishing peace and goodwill among men. You have security and you have peace and coordination in your mind and in your heart, in your home, in your affairs, only in proportion that you have seen to the business of establishing it. No one will ever impose it upon you. You can have just as much of it as you choose to have. The important question arises here. Does man really want the answer to this question of peace and eternal life? To what extent are men interested in it? If we want the answer, all we have to do is to look at the world. Just look at ourselves. We are really interested in it only in the proportion that we express the answer in our living. The answer is never withheld from anyone. Seek and you shall find. Knock and it shall be opened unto you. Matthew 7:7. It has been proved that the person who had been thoroughly imbued with this system and are sincere in seeking the light in their own souls do move step by step to greater heights. They find new measure of light and intelligence, new measure of power. There are always a few such individuals on the planet, and they are the ones who are balanced. They bring the light of truth. They bring the balance of truth. They represent the prophecy of all men that they too can come to see and understand, that they can find and enter into a greater experience. These men and women have been initiated into the mysteries of the kingdom. They are living by what they themselves have found to be true, the establishment of their own souls. Yes, they may have read and listened, but they did something else too. They went to work. They demanded of themselves this inner experience that reveals the way, because the individual must take the initiative and go forward by virtue of his own vision. Earlier in my own ministry, when I came to readjust myself from the traditional viewpoint to the metaphysical viewpoint, I felt rather shaky and insecure. I did not feel that what I had was just right. I wasn't exactly sure of myself. I was in between, in a sort of a no-man's land for a while. But I was sincere and gradually moved over into the new viewpoint and found security. Now many people find themselves in a similar position. They realize they are not finding what they feel in their hearts they should find. It is difficult to let go of the traditional pattern when you feel a pull to the new and different. It is a crucial time. You must learn to stand alone with God, with no dependence upon organized groups. No religious organization or individual has a corner on the truth, and no one as yet has known all there is to know about anything. You can have your own inner experience, and you receive with it the knowledge that gives you assurance that you have taken a true step, and that you know. As our Chinese friend Lao Zhu said, a step taken in the right direction never has to be retaken. It is true that when you have this inner experience, you do know. Truth reveals the way of life for the individual. You shall know the truth step by step, and you shall enter into that fuller life and experience that Jesus announced, true freedom. Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. John 8:32. Therefore, do not be afraid to entertain those ideas you feel are true, even if you do not yet fully understand them. Entertain them kindly, and they will grow and become active and productive for you. We have a special responsibility today because each one of us is facing unusual experiences. We are seeing the people of nations being changed and blended. We are unified and harmonizing. We are coming into a new measure of unity. All right, to what extent are you prepared for that unity? You see, we are our brother's keepers in the sense that we must keep him in his true place in our minds. Well, you may ask, what is his true place? His true place is in the kingdom as a Son of God. We must hold this realization in our minds for every person, regardless of appearances, that he is a Son of God. He is a child of the infinite and born for eternal light or eternal day, the same as you and I. We are all born for this greater experience. Therefore, we must realize that we are all equipped to follow in the way of Jesus Christ. The important thing to realize is that every person has within himself the spark of divinity, a measure of the original light equal to his own need, and that he is equipped to see and understand that light and use it where he is. This is a new concept of evolution, and its realization will bring about the right attitude toward your brother. But in order to have this, you must have the same attitude toward yourself. You must have the attitude toward yourself that there is within you the light of eternal life that is ready and able to reveal to you your next step, your next real idea, your next movement in consciousness, that you may move into a fuller and larger world. You then would naturally include in your expectancy this great idea of your being immortal. You would be comfortably adjusted within yourself to the fact that you are immortal, consciously immortal. Death would have no horror for you then. You would consciously enter into that transition or graduation step in a way similar to the way Jesus did. He went to the grave, and he went through the grave, knowing within his heart and soul that he was master of the whole situation, that he would lay him away for 3 days, and he would rise again in a spiritual body. He expressed this conviction in these words, I lay down my life that I may take it up again. No one taketh away from me, but I lay it down of myself. I have power to lay it down, and I have power to take it up again. John 10:18. So you too will someday be able to meet his experience and live here realizing that you are a spiritual being, that death has no hold on you whatsoever, that you are spiritually self-conscious, and that you are now consciously immortal. Yes, you may lay down this house, but you will go on consciously and victoriously about the business of being a true Son of God, and carry with you the atmosphere and nature of a Prince of Heaven. Then you enter into the fullness of the glory of God, for it is the Father's good pleasure that you shall have all these things. So Jesus Christ came as he did and followed through in this great drama, not for the purpose of startling humanity, but for the purpose of showing us the way. He came to remind us of our spiritual potentialities, to bring to our attention our potential freedom, our potential mastery, our potential joy in the glory of God. All this belongs to us as individuals, and as individuals we must claim it and demonstrate it. Now have a moment of silence that you may at this time in your own way accept a new spiritual quickening, a new spiritual realization within yourself. In the glorious unity of Christ you accept the inheritance of conscious immortality, that you may at all times live victoriously while in the flesh, and at all times announce by your presence your union with Christ. You accept the fullness of this for yourself and for everyone. So be it. In this the gentleman from heaven will have established his mission for you. Chapter 2. The Value of Worship. The value of worship is a subject that appeals to honest and sincere students. Ralph Waldo Emerson said, people are not saved in droves, they are saved individually. Spirituality is an individual experience, and we as individuals are equipped to know the truth that saves us. We can comprehend them, identify ourselves with them, and make them our own. Then we allow them to take us, as it were, into captivity and redeem us in our divinity. When truth takes us in its arms in stillness, the bodily form becomes correct, restored to normal well-being. In this connection I make 3 statements which are fundamental in presenting this work. So great is man, the infinite lives consciously within his being. This is the gentleman from heaven. The divine principle of my being, which is Christ, is the absolute law of my well-being. Meditation on this principle reveals its vital and quickening power to the person's subsequent devoted attention to it brings about the desired union essential to true freedom. The thing one gives attention to, one brings to oneself. The thing one deals with, feelingly, one becomes. He who becomes objectively, spiritually self-conscious, lives in the tranquil omnipotence of Christ. It is for us as individual persons to catch the vision of these 3 steps and follow them through in sequence, that we may understandingly become all that they represent. Then, having gone over the territory, as it were, in one direction, we turn around and go over it in the other way. Our friend Lao Tzu says our approach to illumination is like a bridge. One end represents the east, the emotional, the negative, and the other the west, the intellectual, the positive. Neither one is important by itself. Neither one is real. The real appears where the two meet at the center of the bridge. He says it is well for us to go over the bridge from both ends, and so move into the position where we comprehend the union of both feeling and intellect. Then we arrive at a grand, simple, and tranquil state where we find ourselves the embodiment of all the virtues that make life really worth living. This way of attainment is always available. The only question whether we give it the attention essential to our being guided by it and converted to it. In doing this, we are established in the state of complete security. Worship is an experience in which one stands in receptive awe and reverent expectancy before something wonderful. You may have felt it in response to a sunset or a sunrise or the moon and the star-studded heavens of the night. You may have stood before a canvas upon which was portrayed a work of art, some lovely thing like a tree or flower, and this may have made so deep an impression upon it that it caused time to stand still for you. For that space of time you were lost in wonder, completely subject and receptive to the spirit of whatever cultivated you. In this experience you tasted something that stimulated you, you felt whole, and you also felt more secure and able afterwards. Many people find worship is much more real and satisfactory out in nature than in places set aside for just this purpose. There are others who feel they need the chapel, the cathedral, the incense, and the statuary to help them into focus. Some are moved by the wellspring of life within their own being. These are all great experiences. Some of us have found our way to God to be the way of silent devotion. There are as many ways as there are beings, for each one must follow the light of the indwelling Christ. When I use the word Christ, I mean the love and intelligence of God operating consciously in man, that indwelling presence, the gentleman from heaven. When we have found our way to Christ, we realize this communion can take place within us without regard to material surrounding, because wherever we are, God is, Christ is, in constant attendance. By turning our attention to Christ within, we can experience this communion, which eventually becomes a constant state within us. We are interested now in deepening and broadening our sense of unity with God, that we may by our own inner experience know God in new and greater measure. God being infinite, there is no end to our possible joy and satisfaction. We can always turn to God and be refreshed and renewed and revitalized, and in that experience life takes on a whole new worth. These are some of the reasons for worship and meditation. Now we know that in true meditation and in true worship, there is always an appreciative feeling experience. In this you leave the intellect behind, you leave reason behind, and you enter into an experience that is beyond reason. You enter into an intuitive knowing of eternal values. You may not be able to tell it in words, for whatever word patterns you give it, it will be less than the experience. Nevertheless, your word pattern may be of value to another who may touch it, as it were, the hem of the garment, and experience a new measure of truth. The word truth is an interesting one. We think of it as that which is able to change all things like unto itself. The truth of man being God, then man in tune with God is dealing with the truth of himself, and will be changed accordingly. Therefore, we must look upon ourselves as being legitimately entitled to experience the character and nature of God, to know and to understand God, and in some measure be God. If we admit that we are children of God, then we are admitting that we are a conscious extension of God, that we are never out of God's reach or control. Therefore, we can legitimately expect to manifest the character and nature of God, and this is our only legitimate heritage. If we admit that we are children of God, then we cannot legally claim any hereditary influence other than that of our Father, Mother God. This means we are infinite goodness consciously experiencing itself. And when we come to recognize this and place ourselves subject to its guidance, we will be changed by it and become the conscious embodiment of it. Worship is a wonderful yet normal experience for man, and we can all have it. We can consciously and deliberately set about establishing it. We can enter into such experience by our own choosing, but we must be serious about it. He who gives God second place gives him no place. Either God or good is first, or something else is first. If we are to be conscious embodiments of that which is good and true for us, then it should be first in our love. We will set aside time for meditation, whether we have time for anything else or not. When we establish our lives that way, we discover that all experiences come into order accordingly, and all good will transpire through this knowledge. As the Bible states, all things work together for good to them that love God. Romans 8:28. Love means union. It means sameness. You become the thing that you love. Love makes no demands. It is self-given. When we surrender the relative self to the real self, when we surrender the personal will to the will of our good, then we are in a fair position to be redeemed and restored to balance. Then we come into unity with our good, and we become the conscious embodiment of our good. And there we know. We have deep-seated inner security which makes it possible for us to handle our objective experiences victoriously. There is no frustration, but there is this calm in which we enjoy dominion over that which concerns us. So the attitude of worship is always one of learning, one of love and devotion, of union. Profound worship is always silent. It is always a prayerful experience. So why do we pray? We pray because we feel in a vague way there is much more good for us than we are at present experiencing. There is a hunger and a thirst within us for those inner experiences which spring from the deeper fountains of reality and give real satisfaction. When we pray, we are admitting there is an objective lack, and there is at our disposal that which will fill it. We are interested in finding this answer. This is where our devotion comes in and where our real spiritual life becomes active. When you live a life of pure devotion to real values and are sincere, constant, and devout, you do touch the source of all good, you do come into balance, and you do have those inner experiences in which mystics are always interested. The modern mystic is not only a person who touches, understands, takes to himself, and becomes absorbed in his good, but he is also interested in manifesting it objectively. He brings his inner and outer life into unity, and they become one. Then he becomes the embodiment of that measure of infinite good which corresponds with his point of growth. It is at this point of growth where you understandingly come into possession of something new, peculiar to your own needs. By finding it and accepting it and becoming integrated by it, you grow and change and immediately become more than you were before. So we choose the ideas, inner experiences, and states of mind which, when taken to ourselves, enables us to express more and more of our God nature. He who enters the secret silent place within his own soul will hear the sweet voice of truth singing the immortal song of his own worth. Profound worship is always silent and can never be told in words. It can only be lived. That is another interesting point in our inner life work or metaphysical work. Our living, not our words, not our preaching, not our declarations, but our living announces our accomplishments. In living the truth which we have found, we constantly find ourselves more able to meet our everyday experiences satisfactorily. The psychiatrist tells us that a sane person is one who is able to assimilate his experiences. Consequently, he is able to handle them. It means then that we are off point when we do not handle our experiences. We are not all there. There's nobody home. Now we are at home when we are consciously self-gathered, and I know this. We can learn how to be consciously and deliberately at home every moment. We can live so that all times we are in perfect focus right where we are, and there we will know exactly what we are doing and will know how to do it. We will not be scattered all up and down the highway of life, but will be wholly at home and have conscious dominion over that which concerns us. This is not too much for us to expect. Remember, so great is man that the infinite lives consciously within his being. To appreciate this consciously is to cause it to appear in our experience. Then we will be living these truths rather than talking so much about them. So great and vital is the union with the indwelling presence, it leaves its mark of glory upon the countenance of one who has it. This light is a signature of attainment. The halos pictured around the heads of saints announce this inner glory, which is truth eventually, shall be our own experience. For God is respecter of no persons. Some of us have witnessed this light and know that every being is a unit of infinite light, and every individual carries a light corresponding to his own spiritual growth and development. On other planes, we are known by the light we carry, the light that we are. We may think of a person we have met as having a wonderful vibration. He seems alive, alert, radiant, the whole self vibrant. If we had clear vision, we might see him standing in light, radiant light. Today we are turning our attention towards spiritual consciousness, that we may be caught up in it and brought back to balance and established in a state of consciousness where we feel at all times perfectly secure. This is the great experience in which men are transformed into self-conscious units of infinite goodness. In this way, infinite goodness comes into bud and later into full bloom. Good triumphs over evil. Man as God stands upon the earth in calm, majestic mastery. Worship should not be used to substantiate one's philosophy. Rather, it should bring new measures of illumination, which are necessary for moving into a fuller expression of the fundamental truth already established in our inner being. In this manner, a new step is taken on the path, a new measure of freedom and power is entered into. This procedure for man's growth is recorded in the holy book of all time. The indwelling presence becomes the authority upon which we stand. In worship, new light is chosen. To stand before the throne of grace in devoted receptivity is to be filled to overflowing with the glory of infinite goodness. It is in this way that man is able to glorify God. To glorify a thing is to expand it. The degree in which we manifest God is the degree in which we glorify God. It is for us to know that we glorify God by being God. You can increase your understanding and manifestation of God by entering more and more into the God consciousness, or the mind of Christ. This is real worship. As the consciousness of Christ becomes more manifest in you, it annuls and eliminates whatever error or sin may have been there, as though it had never been. As Isaiah says in the Bible, "Though your sins be as scarlet, they shall be as white as snow." All error is subject to correction by the presence of truth, and when truth becomes active in you, it annuls error. Error or sin is merely an untrue interpretation of that which is true. You cannot know an error to be an error unless you in some measure know the truth. So instead of taking issue with error, our business is to understand the truth, as that is the way to correct the error and free ourselves from it. You see, sin is not our business. Truth is. Those who have been fighting sin down through the ages still have plenty of it to fight. They have not overcome it. The illumined souls of all time have been interested in truth. Truth has been their business. They have been interested in God and in experiencing God, and the reports of their experience constitute the illumined literature of the world. Our business is truth. There is a difference in knowing a thing and knowing about a thing. I feel that each one who reads this essay is at least intellectually converted to the idea that truth understood is able to annul and remove all error as though it had never been. We are converted to this intellectually. We are reasonably satisfied with this point, but if we do not see it operating in its fullness for us, it is because we do not fully understand it. We have not been sufficiently devout long enough to have understandingly grasped the truth and become the truth. Consequently, the truth, the active healing agency, remains just outside our experience, for God is to be experienced. God, truth, or life is not an intellectual concept, but an experience, and it is for us to demand of ourselves that we shall enter into that state of unity wherein we experience that which is true for us, and which is essential to our freedom and strength and progress wherever we are. We need truth or life right where we are in order that we may take the next step. We must demand of ourselves that we shall be sufficiently faithful to understand these points and principles and ideas and let them govern our lives where we are, that we may have our complete freedom here and now. So do not allow yourself to feel that because you have been intellectually aware of these truths over a period of years that you understand them. You may know them all and the method by which they operate intellectually, but it is a question of experiencing them within yourself. This intellectual concept must, through understanding and love, become your experience. To have the experience, one must understandingly grasp the character and nature of the principle. This takes it out of the realm of belief into the realm of positive knowing. Then you are not so much interested in the philosophy, you are interested in demonstrating it. You become the conscious embodiment of the principle consistently and naturally, and in that you are free. Jesus, by the power of his spiritual consciousness, demonstrated over errors as no man has done before. All erroneous traditional teachings and experiences of man were subject to his correct understanding. His own understanding, his power, could annul any of them instantly and establish dominion, harmony, and well-being. He did not do this just to draw attention to himself. He did it to manifest to you and to me that there is within us the potential ability to do the same thing. And we are invited to rise to that same level of consciousness and dominion that he enjoyed. As the Apostle Paul said, "Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ." Have this same government within you that was in Christ Jesus. This is not too much for us to expect. We see by this that Jesus was the self-conscious embodiment of infinite goodness. And that the interesting thing is, he did not apologize to the world for being what he was. He told the world exactly what he was, and he proceeded accordingly, and of course he enjoyed a dominion that was natural and above the traditional thought of the day. Because of this dominion, he was not popular in high places, and those in authority could not feel free with him around. The man who does not know, but should know, is always uncomfortable in the presence of one who does know. I might state here that wherever one is upset by fear, it is because of ignorance. Where you know, you feel perfectly secure. This is only fear where you do not know. We may think we know, but if we are afraid in any situation, the fact is, we do not know. We are in error. Then what is our business? It is to search for the truth, to choose truth, to find and meditate upon truth until we are free. True living is continuous growth and freedom. The Christ of you shall stand one day in calm majesty, mastery over the earth. You shall have conscious dominion over everything which concerns you. You as a being are entitled to objective dominion. You as a person must choose this dominion. Then you must be faithful to your choice, and in lending yourself consistently to it, dominion shall be yours. The attainment of union and dominion is brought out very clearly in the book Conscious Immortality, in the chapter of How Man May Know the Love of God. This is very vital to the point we are making. Unless you live a life of devoted attention to your good cannot take its place in the world. Giving and receiving, remember, is the law of life. You must give something of yourself to your good. What you give becomes the soil in which it can take root within you. If you do not give it something of yourself, it cannot give itself to you. The moment you give to God, God gives to you. It is essential that we respond lovingly to God's love. In that moment, we feel the thrill of new life, new ideas, new knowledge surging up from within. Here we are fed on immortal truth. All religious people in some measure feel the pull of divine love, and they are endeavoring to accommodate themselves to it one way or another. But eventually we find ourselves face to face with the business of understandingly doing this. We are taken out of the dark and brought face to face with the business of knowing God, and in this we have our great experience. You and I, and many more like us in this world, have been called out of the world's confusion because we are now to deal consciously and intimately and personally with God. Your spiritual life is to be a personal experience. You are to walk and talk with God. You are to experience God, and that will be a silent, secret life. Much of it will not care to talk about because it is too wonderful. It is better you do not talk about it, but live it quietly and rejoice in it. Remember, joy is a divine multiplier. Anything you can rejoice over becomes alive and vital. You vitalize it. So rejoice silently and secretly within yourself when you feel God's presence. When you feel at home with God, when you feel calm and easy with God, there is no better experience than to have a full, free, deep, wonderful life in the permanent presence of God. In God you shall find this fullness of joy. You will never find it in this mortal mind. God is able to give you the life, the love, the light, the joy, the strength and illumination, the vitality and vision that you should have in order to live the triumphant life. As long as we keep ourselves happy and vital and interested in life and living and in growth and progress, of course we remain well and fit. There is an ancient Chinese saying about old age that amuses me every time I read it. Old age is not a friend I care to see. If some day he should come to visit me, I'll bar the door and shout, "Most honored guest, I'm out." If one is never at home to the negative, it will cease to call upon one. Someone else put it this way. We do not grow old, we become old because we stop growing. As a being of the infinite, there is no reason for us to stop growing, and as a person, we shall continue to grow in spiritual stature as long as we draw from the proper well. As Paul said, we must not be satisfied with the cisterns. We must dig up the deep wells of wisdom. In other words, you must draw the true light from the fountain of your own soul, because the life and love that flows there is what you need, and consequently you will learn how to draw from it and depend upon it, and you will discover this light to be a constant guide. You will not only have vision, but you will have the vitality to carry it out, because every divine idea contains within itself the entire science of its own fulfillment. You will become open and receptive to this guidance, and walk freely and victoriously by means of it. Worship, to be effective, has to be part of one's everyday life. The silent, secret devotions to beauty, life, love, and thousand wonders we meet in our daily life. You know, if you are alive and spiritually alert to the wonders of life all around you, it does not make any difference where you are, for life is just teeming with inspiration all about you. But if you are not alert to it, you will not see it. One might say, I walked the streets of life, but I did not see the things you saw. I did not hear the music you talk about. Why not? Because he was alert to something else. He saw something I did not see and heard something I did not hear. What I see and hear inhabits the hours of my days and my living. It is for us to realize that we shall see what we look for, and we are free to choose what that shall be. If we are looking for the good, the true, and the beautiful in the world, we shall find it. Emerson said that if we do not find divinity in the lowest places in life, we shall not find it anywhere. But if we do find divinity there, we shall find it everywhere. It's nice to know that every being carries this precious jewel of spiritual truth within himself, and if you train yourself to look for it in others, you'll find it and get their interest and cooperation. Such persons will be your friends for all time. Why? Because you recognize God in them. In your recognition of these values in others, you make friends of them. In order to have a friend, you must be one, but you cannot make people deliver to you what you do not see in them. Clear vision looks past the faults and sees the points of value in other people. He may not know just why he loves and respects you, but the secret is that you have found something in him that you could really appreciate. Everyone is interested in being appreciated. If you find something of worth in people and you silently recognize and appreciate it, then begin to cooperate with you. They do not need to know why, but there will be established a sense of unity and cooperation which will manifest as friendliness. He who worships at the shrine of brotherhood shall find his unity with his fellow man. You see, vital interest is in conscious worship and determines the direction of your growth. To estimate the measure of your possible growth during the coming year, take an inventory of your vital interest now, and you can safely predict that your growth will be in about a year from now. But you have to be absolutely honest with yourself. The most dishonest person in the world is a man who cheats playing solitaire. Just be true to yourself. Don't try to fool yourself. Be honest. Make a list of your vital interests and see what they are. Then put the constructive ones first and let the non-essentials go by the wayside. Organize yourself so that your attention will be focused on the accomplishments of your chosen vital interest. Then you will be investing your life's substance properly, and consequently you will reap an abundant harvest. Worship the good, the true, and the beautiful, and you shall become their conscious embodiment. Remember, virtue attracts virtue. Worship is, after all, the wand of mastery. Man is always successful in a direction in which he worships. We are today what we are because this is the best we have been able to deliver to date. If we are not satisfied, we must reorganize ourselves and change our procedure. You can do this by placing yourself subject to the Christ consciousness, the mind of the gentleman from heaven, and gradually you will be rearranged in your thinking and in your living and find security, peace, and happiness, and discover how to be a real good friend to yourself. If you are not a good friend to yourself, don't expect anyone else to be a friend with you. Make a friend of the indwelling presence, which is your own real self, and you will be manifesting the character and nature which will make its own way for you. You will then find life satisfactory and worthwhile. Rearrange your periods of worship and see that you have time for them, and lend yourself to them, and you will enjoy the thrill of your new life in Christ. Today you are close to God, closer to the indwelling presence than you have ever been. You are in a better position today to deal intimately and satisfactorily with the indwelling presence than you have ever been. Appreciate this and rejoice in it within yourself. Secretly rejoice, and gradually you will feel the vitality of it, and this will be the most satisfactory experience of your entire life up to now. And remember, that which you worship, you become. Chapter 3, The Leaven of Christ. The leaven of Christ is a spiritual force that accomplishes all things for those who have the realization of it. In order to learn how to accomplish all things, we shall consider first the nature of the Christ leavening power, and then the way of realization. First, let us consider the word Christ, so that we may have a mutual understanding regarding its use here. The two names, Christ and Jesus, have been interchanged until their true meaning has become confused. The Christ of Jesus was an extension of God, operating as a spiritual being through the person known as Jesus. We also use Christ to refer to God operating through any other person. Whenever a person expresses true wisdom of love, the Christ of him is operating through his outer self. The successful operation of Christ through Jesus brought about a unity in which the two became one. Christ was Jesus, and Jesus was Christ. Incidentally, the name Jesus was really a title, meaning self-sacrificing Savior. The name by which he was called by his family was Emmanuel, God with man. The reason the combined name Christ Jesus can accurately be used in this case is that the outer self was at all times under the dominion of the spiritual being, the God within, the Christ. Since the outer personality was sacrificed continuously throughout his entire life to the will of God, the crucifixion was a symbol announcing and proving this fact rather than an act involving any new attitude on his part. Since Christ was the very life force which made the existence of Jesus possible, then Jesus was, only because of Christ. Jesus depended on the Christ for his life, whereas Christ's only dependence on Jesus was for his cooperative unit through which to gain the experience of conscious dominion over mortality. His existence was not in any way dependent on Jesus. His power was available to Jesus because it was used in the service of true purpose. The same potential power is available to all persons and is present in the Christ within every person on earth. The realization of this Christ lies in its true expression on this earth plane. To develop this ability in man, Christ exercises his leavening power, which raises the state or consciousness of the other person. This process, however, requires the cooperation of the person, his recognition, loving attention, and understanding. When the person listens quietly and lovingly for the truth that increases his understanding and changes his inner attitude, his consciousness is raised, and his mortality correspondingly redeemed. Thus functions the leavening power. Christ becoming known to the individual brings into his immediate experience the divine intelligence and power by which all error is annulled. When you understand that you can find everything essential to your satisfactory growth and living in your own Christ within, you enthusiastically give this guiding indwelling presence your devoted attention and never again feel separated from him. In order to live in the fullness of your divine nature, you must not only be spiritually guided, but also know how to interpret correctly the law revealed, which interpretation is also learned through prayer and meditation. This leads to a life of general well-being, freedom, and joy, the vitality generator. When you are low, a joyous experience or even remembrance will lift your spirits and replenish your energy. When you are spiritually awake, however, you will instantaneously turn to the indwelling presence, and his joy will tingle through your entire being with its rejuvenating effect, giving you a new outlook on life and the strong, vital ability to deal with it. When you can become quiet, attentive, and devoted to this indwelling presence, the Christ within, you will experience his joy. The person who has gone this far will experience another effect of the leavening power of Christ. In the Bible, we read a great deal about the wrath of God. That word is not a very pleasant one as we use it today. It is used in the Bible, however, to mean the action of good, of God, the corrective power of God operating in an individual. This has a tendency to stir up the contents of the subconscious mind, which may be a disruptive experience. But if you are enlightened enough to understand what is taking place and therefore do not allow it to disturb you inwardly, you can watch even with gratitude the transition from mortal to the real taking place within yourself and in your environment. You will respect the intelligence, love, power, and creativeness of Christ that is working through you and for you. Once this process is understood and its redeeming significance realized, you will be ready to lend yourself gladly to its action. It is normal and natural for man to be well, strong, alert, and active in a constant state of dynamic growth and progress. When and if you lose the way, you should recognize this sign of confusion and get back on the road, right back where you belong, in the consciousness of the indwelling presence, which is able to do everything for you. When you do that, everything straightens out and eventually you will learn to stay there. When you come to know there is nothing so important to you as establishing and maintaining your sense of unity with Christ, you will feel the leaven of Christ working wonders through you and for you. On the bronze doors of the Boston Public Library you may read, "Truth is the strength and the kingdom of the power and the majesty of all ages." What a wonderful statement. One who can realize this has found his freedom. At least he has found the key to his freedom, and having tasted it, he will follow through. Here man stands in silent dignity and receives new measures of strength from the depth of his own soul. Many educational buildings bear inscriptions which announce fundamental principles, but the people who read and honor them objectively go right on in their Adamic way, serving inwardly the selfish purpose of the outer man. If 1/4 of the students graduating from these institutions had taken these ideas to heart, there would have been a leavening of the race mind already. The interest in wealth and wars and other negative conditions would have been lessened, and many would have risen out of the realm of illusion, announcing God's truth by their living. On the walls of New York's Radio City is engraved, "Man's ultimate destiny depends not on whether he can learn new lessons or make new discoveries and conquests, but on his acceptance of the lessons taught him close upon 2,000 years ago." Yet how many people try to understand the lessons? How many try to live their business lives in harmony with it? Unfortunately, there's a human tendency to let the other fellow do it. When you leave it for the other fellow, you miss your own boat. It is an individual program which is available to you alone. You are equipped to find it and use it and grow and reap an abundant harvest. It is your own responsibility. No one else can do it for you. Those of us who have caught the vision of the eternal truth and worked out their application in some measure are interested in sharing the knowledge thus gained to help you move into a position of peace and security and dominion. No one can do that for you. The most fortunate thing in the grand scheme of things is that no one can live your life for you. You must live it for yourself, and you can make it just as fine as you will take the trouble to make it. You can make it just as strong and wonderful and thrilling and satisfactory as you are willing to make it. Now that is putting you in a position where you have to do something about it. Those individuals who rise to a place of great accomplishment do so because they are faithful to their plan. They live a life of devoted attention to their ideals and purposes, and they allow no one or no thing to interfere with their climb up the ladder. He who is faithful in little things soon finds that he has bigger things to which he must be faithful. You grow in your capacity to handle greater things as you move into a larger and more satisfactory way of life. All of this takes place as the leavening power of the Christ consciousness moves into the place of control. The true leaven of Christ is the consciousness of God, or good. Consciousness, as used here, is a state of mind with the power to control ideas, which in turn control matter. All creative, dynamic ideas flow from the consciousness of Christ. They are brought to our attention that we may recognize and court them, and understand them, and then begin to manifest them, and by manifesting them, live in the fullness of them. In the consciousness of Christ, we find all the ideas essential to the manifestation of all that is true for us. Each day, as we progress, we find and understand those ideas. We understand more of God, of our good, and thus find ourselves living in a new way. We must train ourselves to put the emphasis on understanding God. The aim of religion is to understand God, but the emphasis has been misplaced. Instead of being put on bringing the individual to a place where he begins to experience God, it is focused on supporting the machinery of the organization. It is said that no one can understand God. It is so that no one really ever understands all of God, because God is infinite. But you are equipped to know that measure of God that you need to know in order to live satisfactorily today. You are equipped to have the understanding, and if you do not take advantage of it, it is your great loss. When you are properly related with God, you cannot lose the way or become afraid, confused, or ill. In the consciousness of unity with God, there is perfect peace, security, and well-being. We can therefore well afford to give these ideas the attention they require in order for us to come into conscious union with them. The intellectual concept of God should be transformed into a literal experience of good. Christ became God incarnate. We see in Jesus Christ the ultimate way of life for all mankind. Jesus was interested in our becoming as he was. He was very different from the majority of leaders in the world today. He did not go about telling people how wonderful he was. He let his works announce his worth. He taught the way of life by his own example. He demonstrated a way of life so that his fellow beings might rise to the point of realizing that all of this was within their reach, that they too could be as he was. He emphasized the necessity of conscious unity with the Father. I and the Father are one, John 10:30. That is the way. It is the way for each and every last one of us. Each one of us is equipped to become consciously one with the Father. The Father means united, infinite action which guides us and experiences itself through us. This state of conscious unity has not been established by very many people. A few, however, have found their peace and come into a sufficient measure of a unity with God so as to no longer be concerned or anxious about themselves or anyone else. They live in the conscious victory of Christ and know that the leaven of Christ will eventually reach, heal, and redeem every human being. The more redeemed beings there are, the easier it is for the rest of us to move into line. These things are brought to your attention so that you may do something about it. If you do not, you miss a great opportunity. There is nothing in the world that gives as much fun and joy as to know and manifest truth. There is no greater satisfaction than this, with its resultant handling of affairs in harmony. A man without faith in the power of good or realization of the leavening conscience of Christ will not know the peace and security of righteousness, nor will he inspire nobility in his fellow man. He is filled with conceit in regard to his learning, and is therefore blindly led. We have too many brilliant intellectuals in the religious world. We need individuals who have more of Christ's consciousness, more of the intimate inner experience with God. The person possessing the qualities of power, poise, and security is always a quiet, sane, purposeful, and harmoniously thinking and operating individual. Where God is, there is always order and growth and progress. There is joy and victory. There we can be also. It is for us to realize that we have at our disposal all that is essential to our coming into the full experience of manifesting these eternal qualities. Chapter 4, A Highway Shall Be There. And an highway shall be there, and it shall be called the way of holiness. The redeemed shall walk there, and the ransomed of the Lord, and everlasting joy shall be upon their heads. They shall obtain gladness and joy, and sorrow and sighing shall flee away. Isaiah 35. The sincere Christians of our times have the opportunity to find the way onto this highway, and to come into the realization of the fullness of the gladness of joy described here. It should be the expectancy of every Christian. Man is privileged not only to find the truth, but through understanding to experience it. His task is that of accommodating to the character and nature of all that is true for him, and it is a big job. In spite of all the teaching, the way is still not very well understood, as evidenced by the lack of Christliness among Christians. They promise results are missing, whereas the right answers are missing. There is something wrong with the procedure. When one is working correctly, he will get the right answer. Usually when people go on the highway, they are going somewhere and nowhere. If a Christian were asked where he was going on his highway, what would he answer? Well, it leads into the kingdom of heaven. The movement toward this highway is one of thought and understanding and experience. The travel on the highway is toward a still higher goal of glorious attainment. On every highway there are many inns where we may stop and linger. If they fascinate us, we stay there for a while. It is the same with our spiritual program. The inns are the byways, the snares we get into, and we find ourselves involved in such a way that it is difficult for us to get out, but the highway remains there just the same. It is always there. The way for you to enter into the kingdom of heaven eternally awaits you. It is waiting for you now. It is the way of intelligent, scientific thinking and living. When you move according to the law in perfect sequence, you will get somewhere worthwhile. This means that in thought you are correctly interpreting the laws in your way, the law by which you arrive at your destination. It means that you are reading your maps correctly, you are following through and staying on the highway, and not allowing yourself to be sidetracked. We should only be interested where we are obtaining correct answers, getting correct results. There is a great difference between being intellectually intelligent and being really intelligent. To be really intelligent means that you live intelligently and move freely from one step to another. You feelingly progress according to the law of your own well-being. You are in a conscious, understanding state of growth and progress. In other words, your program is under control. You are controlling it and moving according to the plan. Consequently, you will be definitely moving into a fuller and larger experience, and life will be consistently more worthwhile and satisfactory as far as you are concerned. This is a piece of private business, absolutely a private affair. No one can live your life for you. No one can walk your path for you. That is your privilege. When you become understandingly related with your path, you will be intelligently living your life. That will mean, of course, that you will constantly become more and more of what you potentially are. You will be manifesting more and more of that which is the truth of you. Then you will be giving a correct account of yourself as a child of God. We know enough to discard some things that do not give a correct account of themselves. For instance, when you go into a garden and you find that one of your plants is not growing properly, you may put up with it for a while, but eventually you will probably pull it out and throw it away. You do that because the plant is not reporting by its manifestations what its seed said it should become. In other words, it is not correctly transforming its own potentialities into an objective demonstration. Plants and animals as a whole do a far better job of being themselves, however, than we do. A far better job. You remember the story of the lily, that Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed as one of these. No, Solomon had 1,000 other interests than just being Solomon. The lily has only one interest, and never lets up on the business of being a lily. In other words, it stays on its own path. It is about its own business, which is its Creator's business, and does a job good of it. We are told that our eyes must be single. To have a single eye is to attend to our business and to see to it that we fulfill our destiny. To see is to grasp understandingly or to comprehend. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. The Christ of you is saying to you, I am the way. I am the way. The law of your whole being is the law of my being, and you shall know the way. You shall know the truth of the way, and live it. And you shall know freedom with your good, and constantly grow and progress as a being should. Only those who have risen above both emotionalism and cold analytical intellectualism find the way and remain upon it. It is called the narrow way. It is a narrow way in this sense, that the individual who has caught the vision and now has the appetite for that which is true for him is never interested in anything less than that which is true for him. Since you find everything that is true for you in this way, you have no time or place or interest in anything less than that. As you deal with the truth of you, staying on your seemingly narrow way, you find that it extends and spreads out until, after a while, you find only that which is true for you. Naturally, then, you have no other interest or appetite. You will hunger and thirst only for that which is true, or righteous, and consequently you live gloriously. It is good for you to know that at the very beginning. It is a good plan for us to remember that we are always beginning. Never think of yourself as an advanced student. When you feel advanced, you take on an atmosphere of separation, which is detrimental to growth. Jesus said we could not make progress until we became as little children, that is, remain teachable. Therefore, let us always be willing to think of ourselves as being led along the way. You are in a true state of progress and growth when you begin each new day with the truth you have and expect to be more at the end of the day. We who take this attitude will gather ourselves together every morning and think to ourselves, now here is another great day in which I am going to be able to live not only the truth I have found, but also a new measure of truth gleaned today. Therefore, today is to be one of the most adventurous days I've ever lived. Gradually, in building up that kind of attitude toward each day, you discover that this adventuresome living has become your experience. That is not just daydreaming. You bring about a condition wherein you really do begin to experience that kind of day, and life takes on a new zest and purpose. This way is revealed to the individual through the action of his own faculty of perception. He alone is capable of divining it and following it. No one else can do this for him. It is a secret inner experience which takes place between one's Christ self and one's personality. The personality is the one part of us that does not know its way, so one who brings the personality back under the guiding and governing influence of the Christ begins to see and know and understand, and to follow through with objective demonstration of goodness. But you have to do that for yourself. You are the only one who can lock truth or Christ out of your life. You are the only one who can turn the key and release truth into your life. The power of decision lies with you. It is for you to train yourself to recognize, appreciate, and accept that good thing which is announcing its presence at your door. You do need it, yes, because it belongs in your immediate experience. It is there waiting for your acceptance. But in order to accept it, you must, through choice and prayer, come into unity with it. Then you weave it into your own character and nature, and you have a new control, a new power, a new light, and a new measure of freedom in your experiences. All of this takes place gradually within your own being. That is why the true life is a silent life, and a life of devotion. It is a silent, secret, eternal devotion that goes on within yourself. When you keep yourself correctly related with the revelation of divine intelligence, you consciously know what you need to know, and have what you need to have in order to carry on victoriously wherever you are. In coming into this condition, you come into a new control, and you are expected to have this control. When a person learns how to respect the guidance of the Christ self, he will follow this guidance. In doing so, he will find his feet firmly established upon this sunlit highway of the redeemed. We use the term sunlit way because it is an illumined way. In this you live an illumined life. You do not live in darkness and fear and go stumbling along through life. You are seen, understanding, and moving intelligently, under control, and this is as it should be. We all know the story of the blind man who had his sight restored to him. From that moment on, he had to learn to cooperate with what he could then see, as an individual who could see. When truth dawns upon you in a certain department of your life, you are no longer blind. The light of the way has been given to you, and you are expected to use it and live in that way. Unfortunately, it seems to be the experience of most people that when they are given a new light, they hesitate to use it. They do not want to be disturbed and have to rearrange their way of life. They are glad to know the light is there, but prefer to go on living in darkness. When you have found the light, venture out into it. Do ships fear launching for the scarceness of the sea? Then you must learn to live in the light of the truth you have found. Live by it. And when you do so, you find yourself living much more serene and gloriously, and your fears, inhibitions, lacks, and all sort of things fall away, and you stand free and clear of them. The Superman is not a physical giant. He is a spiritually integrated being, restored to the correct understanding and use of his divine nature. This man will have complete control over all things concerning him. All power is given unto him in heaven and in earth. This is not too much for you to expect. If you claim to be a child of God and a son of the Most High, then you must anticipate coming into this position. Being your destiny, it represents your good. There is only one destiny, and that is to find how to be that which is true for you. You should accommodate yourselves to it as readily as possible. Every one of us someday will arrive at a place in consciousness wherein we will have to come into a state of unity with the truth of us to such an extent that we'll have finished our school days here. There will be nothing more to overcome. Having arrived at this point, we will go on about our business and enter into new measures of growth and progress. But as soon as we have lessons to learn, we shall be around here to learn them. We should learn our lessons as quickly and thoroughly as possible and go on and enter into new experience. Although the highway is narrow and difficult in the beginning, it gives satisfaction and encouragement in whatever measure you stay upon it. As you proceed, it becomes wider and smoother and more definite. The climb is not so steep, and the radiance of spiritual light is more intense. You enter into an illumined life and become an illumined being. You operate in a realm of light, which means a realm of understanding, a place of complete and absolute mastery. This belongs to everyone, and have it in proportion that we choose and accommodate ourselves to it. Radiant in the glorious light of one's own spirituality, darkness is forever gone. There is no further need for borrowed light, for the redeemed one is light unto himself. One dark night I loaned my lamp to a stranger, who had lost his in the confusion of a storehouse. At the end of the age he returned my lamp to me. I knew he had found his, for mine shone with an added brilliance. Whatever light you borrow in order that you may find your own light. At least you should use it that way. Whatever measure of truth you glean from another or from experience, you should realize in your own living. As your own light grows, you move into a position where you no longer need to borrow light. You carry within yourself a light that is more than sufficient for your needs. You do not need the help of the laws of the world to enable you to live in a godly way. The redeemed man is a light unto himself. As he cannot hide this light, he becomes inevitably a light unto others also. This is his true service to mankind. The redeemed citizens traveling the illumined highway of the kingdom of heaven are spiritual beings, living in a spiritual world and subject to the government of spirit. They are conscious units of pure light in which there is no darkness. This is your true place and state, toward which you can start moving now. Choice is ever with you. Chapter 5. Jesus the Master Teacher. In thinking of this subject, it is well to take into consideration the world in which Jesus found himself, the environment in which he was to work. The Jews at that time were divided amongst themselves as to their religious beliefs. The rabbis lived a devout life, and their worship of Jehovah was pure to a great extent. The ritualistic group was difficult because they worshipped the law to such an extent that everything had to be done exactly according to the way the law was written. This stringent application of the law made common living difficult for the Jewish people. Everything they wore and did came under its influence. If their shoes were not set a certain way when taken off at night, for instance, a law was broken. When Jesus found himself facing a group of people whose attitudes and customs were so rigidly bound up in laws, he took a definite position regarding the situation. He said, for instance, that man was not made for the Sabbath, but the Sabbath was made for man. With many similar statements, he reversed the position of the lawgivers. He told them that following the law as accurately as they were going did not represent the free expression of God in man. Now heretofore it had not been in the Jewish thought that man could be a conscious embodiment of the expression of Jehovah. When Jesus announced that he and the Father were one, he took upon himself a measure of divinity that was contrary to the thought of this time. The Jews felt that he had no right to do this. Nevertheless, he persisted and consequently changed the attitude of the people who followed him. He was also announced that Jehovah was a God of love, which was contrary to the traditional idea held by the Jews, to whom Jehovah was a very hard taskmaster. Jesus' name was Emmanuel. His very being and every act announced the presence of God as love in man. This tremendous fact changed the thought of the world so greatly that he is the only teacher who has been so honored as to have the world calendar set up with relation to the time of his birth. By the establishing of the fact of God, or good, with man, God entered into the written and authoritative history of man in the world. Spiritually minded beings had come to earth, and it could be from then on earth as it was in heaven. In completely upsetting traditional religious thinking, Jesus put himself in a serious position. Nevertheless, he held quietly and consistently to it, because he occupied a position within himself that the rabbis and educators of his time did not have and did not understand. He said, "If I do not the works of my Father, believe me not. But if I do, though you believe me not, believe the works, that you may know and believe that the Father is in me and I in him." John 10:37. This was taking a positive, authoritative position beyond the understanding of the majority, so they looked upon him as a radical. And he was. He was the greatest radical ever to come to this planet, because he upset the whole procedure of the thoughts of men and established a new vision, a new pattern of thought, and a new attitude toward God and man. A teacher who could accomplish such a Herculean task could not have something more than his predecessors had. He did represent a combination of virtues, understanding, and power that was without precedent. To repudiate the traditional attitudes and carry on successfully in the face of them certainly adds up to the fact that he represented something above and beyond the leading religious thought of that time. He carried on his mission in his preaching, his teaching, and re-educated and spiritualized the inner attitudes of men by the demonstration of his living. Even as a child, he was always ready to offer the hand of fellowship to any true seeker. We are inclined to question the authority of a new voice uttering new ideas. Where do they come from, and whence their authority? This we know, if we know anything at all about the cosmology of man, that he is an ever-growing and expanding unit of infinite intelligence and infinite power, and can never reach the ultimate of his growth or progress. There will always be times when man will be bringing out the depth of his own soul ideas that represent values beyond those which have already been announced. New vistas of growth and progress will always be revealed to devoted individuals. When these ideas are released to the static world, of course, very few understand them. The majority turn some down on them. The average person considers a new idea fanatical because he does not wish to be disturbed in his more comfortable, accustomed mode of thinking. But if there is to be progress, there must be new ideas, new relationships, new light, new releasement from the fountainhead of inspiration. The individuals who will present these new ideas are those living a devout inner life, who have found their way to the throne of grace and entered into a conscious sense of unity with the indwelling presence, the Christ within, the gentleman from heaven. For he who lives in the consciousness of that indwelling presence lives in the conscious omnipotence of Christ. Jesus Christ represented this consciousness of the indwelling presence, expressing a light and power beyond the comprehension of man at that time. In fact, mankind is just beginning to appreciate what he really represented and offered. He possessed capacities which enabled him to help all kinds of people in a way particularly adapted to each. Truth does not descend upon us to crush us or even to crush our old ways. Truth is given to us a little at a time, and we are asked to reach up for it and accommodate ourselves to it. But it also reaches down for us. Jesus dipped down into the everyday world and gathered together a group of fishermen for his disciples. Why instead of going to the temples for students? Because the priests and rabbis, the teachers of the law, were all crystallized and set in their dogmatic thinking. But the fishermen were open-minded and therefore more readily teachable and could accept guidance while learning. They were responsive, one of the essential elements in this relationship. They had the capacity to recognize truth and enter into a new way of life. All through his life, from a time of calling his disciples until the Last Supper and his ascension, Jesus remained the teacher par excellence. He never lost an opportunity to teach. He was not interested in putting on a show or being spectacular. He did only what he felt was needed in order to break the crystallized attitude of the multitudes. He opened their minds and hearts to new ideas and revealed to them that he was not only a preacher and a teacher, but also one who had the power to demonstrate all of his teachings. He was a combination of light and power, of vision and mastery, a fulfilled unit, a redeemed being, an individual possessing the power to live on earth as life is lived in spirit or in heaven. He did all of this to show forth the glory of God. Do you say, but why the glory of God, and why this ministry he was engaged in? Because he knew that every last individual in the universe is entitled to know what he knew, and to be as he was, and that all were invited into this great experience. He came back that he might share with humanity this great accomplishment of living in the kingdom of heaven while on earth. His ministry was to show us the way, and he never ceased going about his business of preaching and teaching and demonstrating. He took another position that was foreign to the religious procedure of this day when he said, "Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." Matthew 11:82. All were invited. It did not make any difference whether they were Jews, Greeks, Romans, bonded, or freemen. In effect, he said to them, if you are interested in following through from the standpoint of a God of love, rather than one who is a hard taskmaster, and will become my disciples, you shall know what I know, shall be what I am, and in being this become free. He was the conscious embodiment of everything that he taught. He had conscious control over everything essential to demonstrate completely his being a Son of God. It is said he taught by all the known methods of the day, but his great power as a teacher was that he himself was the thing he was teaching. Having proved all realities through himself, he was all, and therefore spoke with absolute authority. If you know your subject and know that you know it, you will be heard. Now that means you will be understood only by some of the people, and in varying proportion. Certain of the ideas that you present will be heard and understood and taken to heart, and some people will do something with them. Because you demonstrate them by your living, others will want to follow your example. But a merely intellectual idea does not have this power to lead people to action. Life is to be lived. Truth is to be lived. It is not just an intellectual concept. It must be experienced. And the experience of truth moves a person onto a new level of activity. It was because Jesus was the conscious embodiment of all that he taught that he was able to exercise the authority that he did. Because within himself there was the combination of all that is true for man, he has come to be recognized as the greatest spiritual teacher and leader of all times. In the Christian countries, the greatest developments for the benefit of mankind have taken place. All that has been given to the world as the product of inspiration has come through the experience of individuals who are living a devoted inner life toward certain purposes. Our inventive genius, as a result of inner consecration, has placed in the hands of humanity new control, new powers, new ways of doing things, whereby men may live more graciously and more victoriously. The delivering of all this is due to inner life experience. What the world does with what has been delivered is another thing altogether. The world mind will frequently take holy bread and throw it to the dogs. Many wonderful things have been twisted into instruments of destruction. Every true idea brought into being was meant for a constructive purpose. Therefore, we have a responsibility to return to that inner life, get ourselves straightened out there, and see to it that these wonderful things shall be used for constructive purposes only, that men may live more harmoniously and satisfactorily together. This is an individual responsibility first, and an international responsibility second, requiring illumined intelligence. If we are to reap the fruits of the teaching of Jesus Christ, we must demand that we be honest with ourselves. If we profess to be Christians, we are not being honest with ourselves unless we get down to business and go after a working understanding of the truth teaching until our living demonstrates that we too have embodied the truth that Jesus taught. We shall become this embodiment in proportion that we seek the truth and are flexible in the hands of the Lord, guiding us from within. It is a question of accommodating ourselves to what is true for us. We are equipped to know what we need to know in order to be what we should be right where we are. This is our true inheritance. Jesus taught that in every man there is a light that is the truth, and that when he comes to experience that light, he will be able to carry on successfully. It is for us to demand of ourselves that we understand that which is spoken to us within our own soul. Jesus was understood, or his teaching in the New Testament would not be so pure, and would not have been carried forward as it has been. Even if only a few people understood what he taught while he was here, he put into the consciousness of the world a measure of truth and spiritual power which has changed the face of the world, the thought and purpose of man, and has brought liberation to us. His own report on what he thought of his ministry at the end was, "Be of good cheer, I have overcome the world," John 16:33. He had given man the keys to freedom. The way of life was established by Jesus at that time, and there is nothing that can ever annul it. It will go on in its unfoldment and development. More and more people will recognize it and appreciate it and accommodate themselves to it and live accordingly. All of this he had the satisfaction of knowing within himself. Consequently, he did not hesitate to announce to the world that he had overcome the world. He knew that what he had delivered here was a leaven that would affect the whole lump. He had delivered an intelligent expression of this truth for man in such a way that people all over the world would eventually see and understand it. The kingdom of heaven has always been at hand for you and me, and our program lies in finding a way whereby we can reverse our thought of being separated from God, from the kingdom. The thought of separation is the basic sin. It is sin or error to be separated from your good. Fear not, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Luke 12:32. You can have it just as fast as you learn how to have it. You have to train yourself to give it devoted attention. When you follow the ray of light within your own soul, it leads you to the door of the kingdom. When you enter the kingdom, you will find many people there, all experiencing their own measure of growth and understanding, which may be different from yours. People stand in different places on the path. To make further progress in the kingdom, each must have what he needs right where he is. All those entering into the kingdom find themselves able to have what they need where they are in order to live fully and move on into a more complete expression. There is no finished program, but rather we are always at the point of growth and expansion. When we appreciate this, we live joyously and victoriously in the present, knowing that our needs are fulfilled even before we are aware of them. Jesus knew that he could have whatever he needed wherever he was. He demonstrated that power and said we should do the same thing. You shall one day enter the kingdom and enjoy the great power of being able to have what you need where you are. Then you will be living to the glory of God and of man in the New Jerusalem. If you live to the glory of God upon earth, you are living to the glory and blessing of man, for you announce by your living that it is possible for man to accommodate himself to this way. Jesus always knew how to handle every situation. The 53 major miracles attested to his continued authority. Therefore he could say that all power was given unto him in heaven and on earth, in consciousness and in actuality, in the invisible and in the visible. God the Father, manifesting as the Son, demonstrated the kingdom of heaven on earth, the resurrected presence on earth. You are to be restored to your own spiritual inheritance as a self-conscious Son of God and live in heaven on earth, where your heaven is. Heaven is consciousness. The consciousness of the indwelling Christ is the knowledge of heaven, and you become objectively, spiritually self-conscious. You will live in the kingdom of heaven, and will have dominion over everything which concerns you. From then on, great joy shall attend your life in the kingdom of heaven on earth. The great teacher Jesus left as the goal of mankind, the gaining of personal mastery. Chapter 6. Poise, Purpose, and Power. He that tilleth his land shall have plenty of bread. Proverbs 28:19. One of the great problems in the religious world is that people do not follow through in their program of spiritual growth. They start off well, but they do not carry on and consequently do not reap their harvest. It is up to the sincere Christian so to organize himself that he is able to give happy, consistent, and diligent attention to this spiritual growth program. The three words poise, purpose, and power all suggest organization. A person who is poised is organized. A person who is purposeful is organized. A person who has power or ability is organized. He who has achieved the very special experience of being consciously self-gathered has established possession and direction of himself and everything pertaining to his growth and progress. When we experience success of this diligence in any one department of life and recognize its cause, we demand of ourselves that we shall be consciously and intelligently purposed in all of our living. that puts us in a fair position to accomplish all of our purpose. Poise is the mantle of truth understood. He who understands has poise because he knows where he is going and he knows how to get there. Consequently, he is fearless. He lends himself kindly and victoriously to the accomplishments of his purpose, with the result that he goes on freely and victoriously and accomplishes where others fail. To illustrate the manner in which the purposeful, organized consciousness can overcome the evidence of confusion in mortal mind, I offer the following personal experience. In a restaurant where I frequently ordered a toasted bacon sandwich on whole wheat bread and a dish of pineapple for lunch, I was told one day by the waitress that they were not selling any pineapple. I said, "That's strange, as I have been getting it here for several days." Just then the manager came along, and I said to him, "I hear you're not selling any pineapple." To which he replied, "No, we are not, because we don't have any." He became quite excited over the idea that they didn't have any pineapple, but it didn't bother me at all. Instead, I felt rather at ease, and I had a feeling there was pineapple there. So I said to the waitress, "Now you go over to the counter there, and under the shelf you'll see 3 bowls. Please bring me the one that has a pineapple in it." She fetched the pineapple with surprise. Now she said that there wasn't any pineapple, and the manager had said there wasn't any, and they could have become so excited over this fact that they couldn't see the pineapple that was there. My consciousness had remained centered in reality, and therefore open to guidance regarding the truth of the situation, so I received the feeling that it was there, and therefore looked for it and found it. It is regarding real values that do exist that the world frequently says, "No, it cannot be done. It doesn't exist." So you have to watch yourself and remain constantly alert and aware of the existence of your positive good that will fulfill your needs, and that it is available upon your recognition and acceptance of it. You do this by simply not being bothered whether you get the pineapple or not. Thus you remain undisturbed. When in the face of the world's declaration that your purpose cannot be accomplished, you remain consciously self-possessed, quiet and serene within yourself, and do accomplish your purpose. You get the pineapple. It is up to you, not up to the world or any other person. One fine day all of us will be consciously purposed, know where we are going, and know that we can get there and have what we need along the way. In the Revelations, John speaks of a being which was clothed with a garment down to his feet. It is the garment of truth, and the individual who understands truth is protected by that garment, which is given him when he learns how to accept it. In other words, because he understands, he is master. We are always master where we understand. Where we know, we go into action fearlessly and accomplish our purpose. Truth in this sense is the fountain of positive knowledge and of the essence of purpose and the power to accomplish. This is a fundamental idea. A son of God or an individual who lives in understanding will represent all understanding and power as far as his own particular world is concerned. Such an individual realizes that he has conscious dominion over everything which concerns him, and goes quietly, happily, freely, and victoriously about the business of accomplishing his purpose. He does not think in terms of barriers or lack or snares at the world mind thinking. He thinks in terms of dominion, and he is up on his feet about his business of accomplishing his purpose. The man of poise is self-gathered, with all his needed faculties under control from within and ready to be called into action. If you were a golf champion, you would also be so because you would learn the game. You would know all the tricks, know all the times when you should do what to win your point, and would make the greatest effort to do so. You would be calling forth the particular knowledge essential to the correct and successful handling of the situation. Both the knowledge and skill would have previously been established within you. In your appreciation of that fact, you would be able to remain self-gathered and poised to the point that no outside influence could disturb your perfect aim and coordination. So we see that the person who is self-gathered has all of his faculties organized. They are alive in him, and he is aware of them, and able to call them through, thereby knowing what he needs to know where he is in order to accomplish his purpose successfully. Fundamentally, we are all endowed with the group of faculties essential to intelligent living. Each one of us has these faculties at our disposal in proportion to the degree that we have developed them. Potentiality, every man is a master. Potentially, everyone is free. We are enjoying as much freedom and as much mastery as we have learned to demonstrate. You can call forth out of the depth of your own consciousness, of your own being, such ideas, abilities, and powers, such faculties as are essential in order that to give you a successful account of yourself and your life. But no one else can do this for you. You must do it for yourself. You must determine within yourself that you are going to develop a certain group of faculties, that you are going to be more able to give a better account of yourself than ever before. You must line yourself up and say, I am going to develop these faculties. I am going to be consciously purposed. I am going to have a new power in my world and a more immediate sense of dominion. At this stage, you have intellectually at least declared yourself as to what you are going to do about the program and have committed yourself to the task. The next step is to develop the power of demonstrating the growth. The process of developing this power is aptly illustrated by the hens sitting quietly on a nest of eggs until the germinating period is completed and they are ready to hatch. A hen that is not a good sitter may justifiably be relegated to the soup pot. How good a sitter are you? What is your relationship to these ideas and principles you have lined up and decided to bring forth into living experience? You must remain faithful to them. You have to form a sort of covenant with them, because these principles, in order that they may live and be productive in your world, depend upon the quality of the devoted attention with which you feed them. Anything you love, you give yourself to. Anything you give yourself to, you feed, and your love toward those ideas produces the same effect as the heat of the hen's body on the eggs. It causes them to hatch in your world. They become an active, productive part of yourself. Then you discover you have quite a new outlook. You know how to do something you didn't know how to do before, and you do it easily and well. You discover another thing. The great healing power of truth is released in your behalf, which overcomes everything that has a tendency to cause you to be disturbed, anxious, concerned, or worried. A general house cleaning takes place. Anything that brings confusion within you has a tendency to slow down your whole program, to poison your system, to be a breeding ground for disease and lack and sorrow. This appears in our world because of our untrue thinking. The individual who takes the care and time to establish himself in conscious union with that upon which he is dependent, the indwelling Christ, will be restored to a state of poise and of wielding power. Power is not a dominant force. It is the ability to make intelligent decisions and to follow through and accomplish with ease and grace. Whenever you feel particularly able in a situation, that is a token of the presence of the Christ consciousness. We have all had days in which we felt we could do almost anything. It is a grand day when you feel strong and able to do everything easily and beautifully because you are so well coordinated. That is the day you are consciously self-gathered, and you are all in one place. You are a unit of power. When you can be like that one day, you can learn how to be like that every day. It is important to recognize that everything being done is done in faith. The positive faith is based on the knowledge that you are equipped to deal with these principles and to understand them and attract them into your character and nature so that you find yourself able to carry on intelligently in all your living. God as man is intelligently purposed. That, of course, is a challenge. As a spiritually integrated being, man is God consciously experiencing himself. Only by means of beings does God express conscious intelligence. God expresses through nature by means of instinctively sequential action. But through beings, God operates self-consciously and is therefore intelligently purposeful. That is an inspiring idea to contemplate. What does it do for man? It endows him with sovereign power in whatever direction he chooses to act. You have authority and dominion, but you have to rise up and claim it. You have to dare to accommodate yourself to it and lay aside all negative suggestions. The world will tell you that this has never been done and you cannot do it, and will accuse you of egotism by saying, in effect, what do you think you are that you can do this great thing? The world says it is not there, but you know that it is there. You can know it is real because when you have had these inner experiences, no man can argue you out of your realization of this existence and power. You can catch your own vision of your eternal worth and what it means to be a son of God. You will honor the dignity of union with the gentleman from heaven. From that vantage point, you would never choose to move in any direction other than one in harmony with your own well-being and therefore with all beings. Your accomplishments along harmonious lines would be an eternal blessing to the whole human family. To enter into the fullness that belongs to us as sons of God, we have to rearrange ourselves. As a son of God, you inherit the character and nature of God, our infinite goodness, infinite power, infinite intelligence. You are infinite in all directions. The Christ still thinks in these terms and operates in this way. As a spiritual being, you also think and live that way. But as a person, you are not operating that way. Why? Because you deserted that holy place and find yourself living in a world of limitation. You have accepted the limitations of the world mind. You have concern and anxiety, and you do all the things that are done in the world mind, and you don't like it. At least you say you don't like it. You feel unhappy here, like a foreigner in a strange land who wants to go home. Then turn your attention back to God. Turn back to that indwelling presence upon which you are actually dependent, and think upon God. Think upon the love of God, the intelligence of God, the power of God, and remember that all this belongs to you. Then you will begin to think of your objective experience as God, or as Christ does. You will begin to enjoy the consciousness or the mind of Christ in the objective world, and you will then take upon yourself the character and nature of Christ. You will lay down the mantle of the worldly, and you will take upon yourself the mantle of Christ. You will no longer go out thinking in terms of limitation, lack, sickness, sin, and death, but you will be constantly thinking in terms of mastery. When you have completely rearranged yourself, you will be operating as a spiritual being. You will be in the world, but not of it, because you will be of the kingdom. There you will live in poise, purposely, and with conscious dominion over everything that concerns you. Then you will have become something else. You will be a prophet to everyone who sees you, announcing to them what they too can do. You will be a living prophecy to all men, that they may follow in your footsteps and become as you are. That is what Jesus did. He came and announced his teaching, and by demonstrating the way, lived victoriously. You too are called upon to do just that. Therefore recognize your place in the grand scheme of things. Recognize your inheritance, declare it, claim it, and organize yourself to be master. Chapter 7. Inner Harmony. Life is not made for sorrow, yet many people believe it is. They live in sorrow chiefly because they do not know better. They do not perceive that all life stems from within. They ignore the possibility of consciously relating themselves with the source of life and do not understand the subsequent growth that comes from it. They fail to realize what harmony in the outer life depends upon harmony within. Complete harmony consists in bringing the parts of one's whole being into perfect unity. Prayer is the means by which we properly relate ourselves with our source. When we learn to use prayer, we find ourselves living in harmony, with all struggle and concern left far behind. We need no such competition in our living. We may grow naturally and successfully without it, yet most of the members of the human family are in daily competition with each other. Such competition would be impossible in the state of enlightenment we call the kingdom of heaven, because there is no place for it. Every person living in the state of mind knows he is equipped to have what he needs to have, by direct contact with the very source of fulfillment of those needs. Though one may have more than another, the needs of each are fully met. To further understand this, please read the beautiful description of the kingdom of heaven as found in the first 16 verses of the 20th chapter of St. Matthew, in the story of the householder who paid all his workers a penny a day. As a more modern illustration of this indiscriminate attitude of the kingdom, let us consider the cattle on public range. One rancher's cattle have come from afar over to a rough and dusty trail. Another's have come from nearby. However this may be, each beast is privileged to help itself to the extent of its hunger and its needs and of its growth. Each helps itself to the lush grass of the range and is satisfied. So it is in the kingdom. Each one of us, when harmoniously related with himself, gives to the others absolute freedom to enter in and take their own places. And we can have our own good just as fast as we can learn how to have it. Some persons wonder whether they are getting a fair deal from life. They become envious and jealous of those who are getting along better. They think life is unfair, because they do not know that it is the Father's good pleasure to give us the kingdom, and if we do not have it, the only reason is that we have not learned how to have it. Jealousy is always an evidence of inadequacy, and these persons lack recognition of their true selves. This true self, the gentleman from heaven, always operates in perfect harmony. But if outer personality is unable to appreciate the harmony operating within himself, he is also unable to recognize or appreciate any harmony in his immediate surrounding. So if we find lack of harmony in our surrounding, we must look to our appreciation of the harmony which abides truly within us. The measure of harmony you find in the world announces to you the measure of harmony within yourself. Your appreciation of that fact will increase your understanding and growth. As with harmony, so it is with any other virtue, expression of God. We must realize that what we find in our environment is a reflection of that within us. So wherever you see virtue, remember it is reminding you of the same virtue in yourself. If you appreciate it and give it attention, you will find that you will come into unity with it, and your nature will increase its ability to express that particular virtue. That is the way of life. These virtues make up the full and perfect character. They wait at the door of every individual. They are waiting full recognition and appreciation, and as we give them appreciation, they increasingly appear in our objective world. When this happens, we discover that we have been changed because virtues are actively growing in maturity within us. All harmonies, whether produced in music, color, form, or motion, come from the depth of our own soul, from that inner thinking unit we call the gentleman from heaven. Beings alone are capable to consciously appreciate virtues. Nature expresses a grand harmony, but she is unconscious of it. But we are aware of it, and in being so, we are in tune with that aspect of God. So with other good things that we appreciate, they are not themselves aware of their existence, but our awareness honors them and gives them place and power in a new mode of expression. Everything needs to be appreciated in order to find self-expressed in the objective world. As our appreciation of the good, the true, and the beautiful grows, so will the harmony moving through us and serving us grow. The secret of all this lies in learning to live harmoniously with oneself. When you are at peace with yourself, no one can disturb you. If your life is not based on the spirit of the indwelling presence, however, then you are not at peace with yourself. You do not have a sense of security, but are confused, afraid, and sick. If, however, you do live in unity with the gentleman from heaven, you will be harmoniously related with yourself and all that concerns you, and will be completely secure and free because you will know that nothing can rob you of your peace and mind without your consent. A number of people have learned how to live harmoniously in some departments of their life, but not in all of them. Whenever we find illness, we know the person's basic need is for more understanding. Instead of taking issue with the problem, he should turn within to his center, Christ, and choose a specific understanding regarding that particular symptom. He can choose to know what he needs to know to restore his harmony in that particular situation. Whatever harmony is gained within will be expressed outwardly. The Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu took the position that people should water the tree at the roots instead of knocking off the branches. He said that they should educate people in the inner life because it is within the being one finds the source of life. To approach to this source of life, therefore, should be through the inner consciousness, the consciousness of Christ. If we are taught and guided by the Christ principle, we will know what we need to know. We will not only be given the right ideas, but also be able to interpret them objectively. Inner life people are quiet people. There is a superlative sense of security about them. Wherever they go, they carry that atmosphere with them. They are mentally, emotionally, and physically cooperative. But people whose life does not stem from that inner place, but rather from the mortal mind, the untrue of the conscious and subconscious levels, have a tendency to be disturbing persons. Wherever they go, they create mental and emotional disturbances in some strange way, just seem to make things difficult. There was once such a person, the owner of a shop in New York, who could throw the whole place into confusion by just walking through it. He poisoned the atmosphere and left everyone on edge. But let us remember that such persons are like that because they do not as yet know how to be otherwise. Those of us who know how to be otherwise should school ourselves to live more constantly from the standpoint of the inner life. We should not leave our room in the morning until we have made our peace with ourselves. We should tune ourselves in, as it were, to the Christ consciousness, and ask help in keeping it present in our affairs throughout the day. When we have attained a peaceful, quiet attitude through ourselves, feel at home with ourselves, we are in a fair position to go out into the world and be harmonious and satisfactory and successful there. A scattered and inharmonious person may expect to find scattered and inharmonious conditions in this world, so you attract the without from the within. You do not truly control the within by the without. To attempt this is both futile and dangerous, as the result of repression prove only too well. True control lies deep within yourself, and you can only become consciously in control when you are consciously allied with the gentleman from heaven. To sink the string of interest deep into the great within is to gradually become acquainted with, and eventually at home in, this serene domain of harmony. On returning to the surface consciousness, one is able to live graciously because he is more poised and control. This is exactly what we are to do, to live within outward. We are to make our peace with the truth of ourselves within and live in harmony with it. By means of this truth, we will be quiet objectively and have the initiative to carry out the objective life satisfactorily. The inner life is a silent experience in which we realize truth through direct perception. When this truth is understood and brought forth into our objective living, we become happy, healthy, gracious, and successful. Everything we do has a tendency to turn out right. We are living in the right place and handling things in the right way. Silence is golden. The planet upon which we live is cradled in a silent harmony of absolute space. Our periods of silent meditation have great value for us and become very precious to us. Some people enjoy long silent periods, some short ones. A New York City truth leader starts his Sunday morning service with a silence of from 10 to 12 minutes and has trained his audience to enjoy that kind of silence. It is indeed wonderful to be able to establish a control whereby an audience of from 4,000 to 5,000 people will readily remain quiet and silent for 10 minutes. It is quite an accomplishment. Children sometimes have the ability to remain in a relaxed stillness for an astonishing length of time. There is an internal coordination about it. Unfortunately, we lose that when we grow up, and we do so because we become involved in the world. We allow the world activities to hurry us, to drive us. A student of mine used to say, I am always in a hurry. She was in a hurry, and she was also nervous and high-strung, and had her many problems. But her basic problem was that she was in a hurry. If we are always in a hurry, it means we are not quiet within ourselves. We are not self-gathered. We are apt to blame others for being driven, not realizing that the real cause lies in our own lack of inner quietude. We should get up in the morning and have plenty of time to do what we need to do, slowly, graciously, comfortable, enjoying a state of unity the whole time. That means starting the day consciously self-possessed. It means being free. When this plan is incorporated into the whole day's living, there is no place where one is not poised and peaceful. Remember, the one who is master of his affairs is never in a hurry or anxious or concerned. The gentleman from heaven stands in the place of dominion and control, where he knows he can have what he needs where he is, and he chooses it and does have it. He is never anxious because he lives at the point of satisfaction every minute. Now the state of poise and quiet belongs to us, and we can have it if we choose it and learn how to accommodate ourselves to it. Of course, we cannot have true inner peace and be at war with the world or anyone in it. If we are at war with the objective world, it is a reflection of the war within ourselves. When we find ourselves in conflict, it is for us to know that we possess the ability to reinstate ourselves into a place of perfect inner harmony, so much so that our whole objective life announces harmony and intelligent procedure. Then we are living in harmony objectively. The calm glory of the redeemed being is more wonderful in all of nature because he consciously knows how to be what he should be. He has consciously and deliberately established himself on that plane of divine integration. In that consciousness, man is a thinker, and he does what he does consciously and with understanding, and has dominion. He not only realizes and appreciates his own affluent state, but he is also conscious of the harmony of the universe. The eternal harmony which we know to be true for God, we may claim for ourselves because God is present within us. When we do not claim this harmony, we deny it. Harmony is like everything else it needs to be and should be appreciated. Unless we give the principle of harmony recognition and appreciation, we put something else in its place. It is for us to demand of ourselves that we learn how to do this and then do it. Those who find the strength to make their peace within and live in unity with the indwelling presence realize that the same condition belongs to everybody. Everyone is entitled to it, and the important point is that everyone is equipped to have it. Starting from wherever he is on his path of growth, he can learn how to achieve an inner harmony and union. Jesus knew this, and that is why he came. He knew the conscious dominion he possessed belonged in varying measures to all men. It was because he knew this that he came back to announce it and demonstrate it, to bring it to our attention and encourage us to reach for it and incorporate it into our own way of life, that we might enter into a large and more satisfactory experience. The nice thing about this is that whatever measure of truth we understandingly grasp, we do objectify by living a more gracious life, a more complete and victorious one. Those who live in peace with themselves always live in peace with the objective world. John the Baptist was a reformer. He was not at peace with the world. He was a radical, shouting to the people how terrible they were and what dreadful things were going to happen to them, and he lost his head. Though Jesus was also a radical, he did not take issue with the people as John did. He pointed the way to freedom. He told them what to do in order to have their freedom, and he endeavored to teach them how to find the way and to live it. Jesus was a leader, John a driver. The world mind is driving, dominant, arrogant. The Christ mind leads, working intelligently and harmoniously. When we are willing to be led and hold an open and devoted attitude, the way is revealed to us. Then if we choose, we are able to follow through and manifest our progress. A leader knows that what he has accomplished is to be achieved by all beings. He then becomes the hope and the redeemer of the many. The truth goes before in this manner and makes the crooked ways straight. Our business is to learn to follow the truth and not allow ourselves to be pushed around by the mistaken world mind. When we live a life of devoted attention to the revealed truth within ourselves, we shall be free. In the calm, poised mind of a regenerated being, there is a clear white light of eternal life. Here it shows forth in all its glory, magnificently pure and possessing the power of Almighty God, which means possessing the power of Almighty Good. When we say that God is Almighty, we are saying that good is Almighty. Then we are also saying that there is nothing seen nor unseen that can defeat God or good, or us when we come to know and live the truth of ourselves. In the realization of this, we will know that the truth of us is God consciously experiencing himself, and we know that back of us is his truth, which is omnipotent. Eventually, every error shall be dissolved and wiped out as though it had never been. This will take place in proportion to the amount of devoted attention given to the indwelling presence. As this presence is accepted, it moves into place into our makeup, and its life comes into action in us for us, gradually dissolving all that is untrue in our world. Some persons object to the word gradually. They think it should be done in an instant. I am not saying that it could not be done in an instant, but I am saying that the average experience is a gradual one. If we do not get into a hurried attitude, it will take place just that much more quickly. The measure of our hurry is the measure of our fear of defeat. So do not ever be in a hurry. Take it easy. Make haste slowly. Live a life of quiet, devoted attention, and you will realize that progress is going on, adjustment is taking place, and you are being established in a conscious state of peace and security. When thoroughly established, you will live intelligently, cooperating with the whole creative plan, being master of all things which concern you. You will become a beacon of light to all who have eyes to see, a sweet-sounding trumpet to all who will be able to hear, because infinite goodness will have found joyous expression through you. God's plan is for us to express his goodness joyously. Nature dons gay new verdure when spring comes, and every lady looks forward to a new hat. If we would live as gloriously in our spiritual realm as we do in the physical, know as much joy and satisfaction in wearing our spiritual clothes as the physical ones, our spiritual life would be announced real worth to the world. We would be giving our spiritual life its freedom instead of hiding it, as we have a tendency to do. This spiritual joy would immunize us against the lift us out of the unhappy moods the world is constantly presenting to us. If we rely on material things to pick us up, every new thing we acquire for this purpose is a sign that within us we lack unity. But let us turn within. Let us demand of ourselves that everything new shall have a new measure of spiritual light. In this way we will bring through into material manifestation a new measure of truth. When we demand of ourselves that we bring more of the truth into everything we do, we will do greater things in the world. The following poem by Marion Pruian illustrates the manner by which one can attain inner harmony at any time by changing one's focus from the negative world to God's world through the medium of silence. Verse: We sat together in the afterglow and talked of earth's old mystery of pain, of wasted toil, of love and anguish vain, of little children born to helpless woe, and men but slaves under the cruel reign, of the blind God their prayers could not restrain. Then we sat silent. On the rocks below, the careless mountain stream foamed at our feet. Above the dark pine silhouette hung fair one star, in whose calm radiance the earth's despair seemed childish outcry. Life grew sane and sweet, for nature's brooding peace was everywhere, and love eternal through her pulses beat. Chapter 8. Intelligent Spiritual Courage. Have not I commanded thee, be strong and of good courage, be not afraid, neither be thou dismayed, for the Lord thy God is with thee whithersoever thou goest. Joshua 1:9. We are of course acquainted with the foregoing verse, at least we are intellectually aware of it. We may not have taken the trouble to have translated it into an experience, but nevertheless we are acquainted with what it said. We find in looking back over history that the really great men and women have been those who have had in their makeup an uncommon element, an element that was a little bit different than found in the regular run of people. It was because of this that they became outstanding people. What they had, of course, was a sense of unity with that which motivated them. We might say, putting it into very modern language, that made them tick. They were at home with it. They had a sense of union with it, and they operated by and were guided by means of it. Consequently, they enjoyed a measure of vision, ability, and authority the majority of people did not enjoy. The average person might look upon them and say they were very lucky, they were very fortunate. In truth, they were endowed with pure spiritual courage. He who really knows or has understanding is fearless. In taking into account what was essential in order that these people might enjoy the fuller measure of vision and power, we must appreciate that whenever people accomplish that which makes them great or puts them in the place where they are outstanding, they have earned it, and they know that to maintain their position, they must continue to work, grow, and progress. Individuals who accomplish great things do so because they remain true to their vision, true to their purpose. They so organize their lives that everything in their experience fits into the accomplishment of their purpose. Such individuals, we can say, are consciously and intelligently purposed. We do not say that all famous people are intelligently and consciously purposed, but many of them are. The purpose may be or may not be constructive, but they are conscious of it. At least they know what their goal is, and the chances are that they are making everything in their experience fit into the accomplishment of their purpose. Now, having intelligent spiritual courage means being intelligently and consciously purposed, and bending everything within your experience to the attainment of a particular purpose. As we apply ourselves and have the feeling of accomplishment, we grow in our feeling of ability. Where we really know, we always have courage. As I reiterate time and time again, each one is equipped to know what he needs to know in order that he may accomplish his purpose right where he is. However, we do not always follow through and demand of ourselves the understanding which gives us the knowledge essential to the meeting of our immediate needs. Nevertheless, we are equipped to do this. One day we will demand of ourselves the adjustments which will put us in the advantageous position. Now then, intelligence is an evidence of spiritual understanding, which represents pure knowledge or truth. We are only intelligent where we know. Where we know, we are fearless. We qualify this word intelligence by calling it spiritual intelligence, which means pure intelligence. Being spiritually intelligent is an evidence of spiritual or pure understanding, an understanding of that which is pure, that which is real, that which is eternal, an understanding that which is really important in the carrying out of our plan as beings in a person. We are instructed that we shall know the truth, and the truth shall set us free. Where one knows the truth, he is free, because he is happily related to that upon which he is dependent, the reservoir of spiritual understanding, the gentleman from heaven. We find as we grow in understanding that we become more and more fearless. We become fearless in more and more places or directions. In many aspects of life we are free and victorious, with no concern, anxiety, or fear. There are other departments of life, however, in which we are not quite so sure of ourselves. This means we do not know what we should know and can know, and eventually will know, because we are to know in all directions and have complete and absolute freedom. This, of course, is pretty much dependent upon the individual's integrity. That is, if you are consciously and sincerely purposed, you will know what you need to know, and you will understand and have your freedom, and you will go about your business of life in true Christian victory as the sun goes about its own business. Courage in an ethical sense is a virtue. Virtue is God expressed. He who wears the armor of truth is by nature courageous. We are instructed that we should put on the armor of God, which means the armor of virtue or good. The armor of good is in proportion to that measure of good we have found and understood. By understanding it, I mean knowing how to operate it. We are aware of so much of our good that we have not taken time to translate into understanding and action. It lies just outside of our operating experience, and consequently, as far as we are concerned, is not real. It is merely an intellectual philosophy or a group of ideas that someday we hope to take the time to know and understand and manifest. Wherever one is spiritually intelligent, he is courageous. A mental, spiritual person could be courageous in the field of philosophy and at the same time be a physical coward. Many people who study these truths are intellectually courageous. They make exaggerated, sometimes very wild statements, all out of proportion to their capacity to express objectively these declared values. Then when unsuccessful experience proves their lack of demonstration, they begin to question the philosophy. They should not question truth, but rather should question themselves. How faithful have I been to these ideas? To what extent have I loaned myself to the correct interpretation of them? Have I learned to live by these ideas, or have I kept them pigeonholed? If we will demand of ourselves a consciousness, interested, working understanding of these ideas and principles, they will become our experience. Then we will have courage to meet the demands that are made upon us in the physical world. We should be very careful about this and not allow ourselves to feel it because we have a fine intellectual concept of that which is true for man. We have it all sewed up. No, we have not. All we have is the material layout, and are now compelled to take hold of these ideas and work them out. We have a group of 7 basic principles which we call the principles of life: power, love, truth, life, beauty, intelligence, wisdom, light. All of these stem from the consciousness of the indwelling Christ. The consciousness of Christ is a reservoir of divine ideas or spiritual principles, all of which are essential to correct, objective, victorious living. Now put these ideas together as a group, and let us think of them as the eggs in the hen's nest. Now, as truth students, we have a group of ideas that held tremendous promise for all of us. They have been brought to our attention. If they are to be transformed from abstract ideas to working knowledge, something has to be done, and you are the one who must do it. What you must do is to give devoted attention to the object of your interest. Devoted attention, loving attention. Your love and devotion toward these principles has exactly the same generative power as the heat of the hen's body has for her eggs. Unless you have given a devoted interest to these ideas over a correct period of time, which is a length of time essential to germinate them and have them delivered as a working program for you, they will not deliver. Truth, like everything else, requires constant devoted attention. Therefore, if you are to succeed in bringing about a state in which you find yourself intelligently courageous, it is essential for you to maintain intelligent and devoted attention toward the basic idea and principles, that they may be transformed into objective experiences for you. Otherwise, they remain just outside of your operating program. However, when you become spiritually, mentally, and physically integrated, you will stand as a Superman, master of all which concerns you. You will also be a monumental prophecy of the inherent possibility of all men. You see, you have become aware of all these basic virtues, are now faced with the responsibility of transforming them into a living program. By that accomplishment, you will be a prosperous and honored person, and a prophecy to all men, because you will be announcing these possibilities to all men. You will be bringing these virtues to their attention. When you see virtue or talent anywhere, honor it, appreciate it. Do not be jealous or envious. Do not feel that certain persons have had an unusual break in life. Remember, wherever you see virtue, you are being reminded of your own possibility. You are having brought to your attention the idea of that virtue which you are being asked to bring about and develop and manifest in your own world. When we look upon all men as our teachers, then we are in a fair position to recognize and appreciate these ideas which lead to a fuller, more glorious objective life and experience. So it is for us to demand of ourselves an interested, devoted attention to these basic ideas, but they may no longer remain in the reservoir, but be brought out and transformed into a living existence. So may we live a successful, objective life, and by that living announce that this same accomplishment waits at the door of all men. Intelligent, spiritual courage redeems man to true nobility. Chapter 9. Self-recognition and self-reliance. All things indeed are clean, however it is evil for that man who eateth with offense. It is good not to eat flesh, nor to drink wine, nor to do anything whereby thy brother stumbleth. The faith which thou hast, have thou to thyself before God. Romans 14:20. The cause of this dissertation was the question whether or not a Christian should eat the meat sold in the temples. Paul answers that the important point is not whether you eat meat or not, but rather your attitude regarding it. If you eat meat and feel guilty, then you judge and condemn yourself. But if you eat meat and do so in peace with yourself, you have no trouble. Paul continued with, Hast thou faith? Happy is he that judgeth not himself in that which he approveth. But he that doubteth is condemned if he eat, because he eateth not of faith. And whatsoever is not of faith is sin. Romans 14:22. Self-condemnation is always bondage, whether the man condemns himself for eating meat or for doing anything else. When he lives in such a way that he does not do anything for which he could condemn himself, then he remaineth free. Have faith in yourself before God. Faith means will without doubt. In other words, you have faith where you know. Where you know you are sure of yourself, you do not fumble and stumble, but go directly into action and accomplish your purpose. You function freely and victoriously where you know, where you have faith before God, which means to have faith before your good. You are to understand that within yourself you are able to help yourself to your good. That constitutes having faith in yourself before God. Happy is he that condemneth not himself for that which he alloweth. In other words, the individual who is at peace within himself toward his own action remains free and happy. One only feels right within when functioning for the good of all. One cannot be free while he holds resentment or condemnation. The individual who goes against that which he feels within himself is right and proper, is an individual whose house is divided against itself. In order to maintain our own integrity, we must stand quietly and royally, self-approved deep within ourselves. The individual who is consciously so integrated will have no difficulty going anywhere in the world because he will have a quiet sense of being able to handle himself wherever he goes. And the interesting thing about it is that he will command without saying a word. He will command the attention, interest, and cooperation of whomever or whatever he needs to fulfill his purpose. Here is a way whereby an individual can live at peace within himself and others and with the world. We only judge, condemn, find fault, and take issue where we are not sure of a situation. Where we have understanding, we will quietly and purposely go about our business. All of this refers to the matter of self-recognition and self-reliance, because the person who is not organized within himself cannot expect to get along successfully in the world and have cooperation from others. He who is cooperative with himself will find others cooperative with him. He must take the lead and stand in place of conscious control over what concerns him. Then he will gain spiritual self-consciousness. Now we know the word spirit means pure. To become purely self-conscious is to actually recognize and understand yourself as you really are. Then you will be sure of yourself. To be aware of who you are and what your potentialities are, to understand and to become all that is essential in this matter of being self-recognized. To know that you have a spiritual self is not enough. That awareness must be pressed to the point of understanding and operating. If you were given an airplane but didn't know how to operate it, you would stand in awe of it, but you couldn't fly in it. However, you would know that this was a way whereby you could learn how to operate it. You would therefore place yourself subject to the instruction until you understood how to operate it and had established a working relationship with it. An airplane is merely an extension of man. Take the man away and the plane cannot function, but the man flies by virtue of a machine, therefore he must understand the machine and his relation to it. It is exactly the same with your own real self, whose extension is your outer self. You are fundamentally a spiritual being endowed with the capacities of understanding, so that you might meet and handle all your experience peacefully and victoriously. Some people have been able to demonstrate this. The real self is none other than the infinite divine, consciously revealing itself, its own potentialities to its own understanding. To quote from the book Conscious Immortality, "So great is man, the infinite lives consciously within his being." In other words, man is the infinite consciously experiencing itself. Until being arrived on the scene, there were no self-conscious units. Every being is a self-conscious unit that has become aware of itself, and in a measure understands self. That unit is the thinker of ideas. God, by means of thinking, beings transforms universal potentiality by thinking them into ideas, and so is an idea creator. Intellectually, we think of these ideas as principles, and each idea contains within itself the entire science of its own fulfillment. The difference between idea and thought is considerable. An idea is an eternality, a reality, and represents a principle. But the thinking we usually do is just about something. Such thinking is relative, not eternal or real, but temporary. An idea is an eternality that stems from the consciousness of God the thinker. The thinker is the mind builder, and the mind is made up of an accumulation of the ideas which the thinker has thought into manifestation. So we find that back of all appearances is a spiritual being that is now consciously experiencing itself, and knows itself to be eternal, and so is consciously immortal. Having once become spiritually self-conscious, it can never again become unconscious of its divinity. Every being is fundamentally set up in this way. So back of you, back of the person or mask you see in the mirror, back of this troubled, difficult, objective person is a being, a spiritual being, that thinks only in terms of growth, progress, and being able to have what it needs where it is, and so it is without fear. We are told to have faith in ourselves before God, so that we may objectively be able to help ourselves to our good as does the real self. In other words, an objective state of unity is to be brought about between this real self and the other person. The mask is to be dissolved, and the man then comes into an objective state of spiritual self-consciousness. He who is objectively, spiritually self-conscious lives in the tranquil omnipotence of Christ. This is not too much for us to expect. Jesus Christ demonstrated all this freely and victoriously, and he instructed us that he expected us to rise to the same measure of dominion and even go beyond it. For greater things than these shall ye do, John 14:12. So we realize there are no ceilings as far as spiritual growth is concerned. The trouble has been in our becoming so idealistic and futuristic, so distant in our thinking, as it were, that we completely neglect the here and now, and it is here and now that we are expected to recognize these ideas and learn how to use them in our immediate experience. You are equipped to handle every experience you meet along the way intelligently with freedom and satisfaction, so that you do not find yourself carrying along a lot of unfinished business. You can meet each experience quietly and victoriously and finish it. He who comes to recognize that there is within his true self the capacity for victorious living finds a state of consciousness which gives him objective conscious control over everything which concerns him where he is. Remember, it is always where you are that you are expected to exercise dominion. Not tomorrow, not next week or next year, but today, in this moment, at this place. You should demand of yourself the intimate sense of that which is true for you to the point of being able to demonstrate it. Results are expected where we are, in the relative world of space and time, yes, but through the power of the eternal now. So you are faced with the joy and anticipation of laying down all of your limitations and having them replaced with talents, power, intelligence, love, life, and the ability to handle each of your experiences peacefully and victoriously. This brings you into a place where you are established as self-reliant because you have integrated with the spiritual being who has always been self-reliant on his own plane of action. If you do not have an intelligent concept of what you as a person are really dependent upon and the necessity of being correctly related with it, then you are in the dark as far as self-reliance is concerned. When you come to know the indwelling presence, you find it is something greater than intellect, greater than the five senses, greater than the person or that upon which the person thinks he is dependent. Remember, you are a spiritual being with a physical body. You are a spiritual being before you have a physical body. You will be self-conscious spiritual being before and after you lay down your physical body. And it is this spiritual self-consciousness upon which you are dependent. In order to become acquainted with it, we learn to live in harmony with ourselves and all mankind in Christian victory, in such a way that we harm no man, accomplish our purpose, and bless every man. This is as it should be. Everyone is equipped to do it. Therefore, we can look forward to coming into that adjustment which gives us objectively a sense of self-reliance. In this self-reliance, there is no suggestion of isolation from one fellow being. Rather, one becomes more and more properly related to the brotherhood of men. This self-reliance means a recognition of our abilities as serving yourself and simultaneously all persons. The reason why we have seemingly lost our sense of self-reliance today is because we have turned our backs upon that which we are dependent upon and have endeavored to get along without it. Now we are realizing our folly. When you have turned around and become consciously self-purposed and directed, you will be able to give a consistently better account of yourself in your everyday life. In your profession or business, in your home, everywhere you move, you will be cooperating with greater efficiency and doing everything with greater ease. This means you will lose your conflict with life, lose your resentment toward yourself and others and the world. You will live quietly and easily and victoriously within, and you will also meet unusual outer experiences the same way. You will not be easily disturbed or thrown off point, but will consistently maintain your state of unity, which means also your state of control from within. Here we arrive at a place where fear is not known. We hear so much of hidden fears. No one seems to be completely free of all fears. They may think they are, but in the subconscious is almost always buried a certain amount of hidden fear. We are only difficult and pugnacious when we are afraid, and we are only afraid where we do not understand. So whenever we find ourselves confused or disturbed, we may know that we are afraid and need to seek understanding in the particular matter. When you find this method works in eliminating one fear, you will be willing to put it to work on all your other fears as you become aware of them. If you were getting wrong answers to mathematical problems, you would go back to your principles and work the problems out until you found the sequence that gave you the correct answer. Why not do that from the standpoint of having these wrong answers that are our fears? We race on and destroy ourselves rather than stop and take time to become reintegrated and return to our place of first principle and establish ourselves there. This would enable us to gradually eliminate all our fears. That is a place of positive, protective security. When Daniel was in the lion's den, he was not afraid of the lions, and the lions in turn were not afraid of him. If he had been afraid, he would have been stimulated fear in the lions, and they would have attacked him. Wherever we are afraid, we are asking someone to oblige us by doing something undesirable to us. Accordingly, fear is a destructive choice. So if we are intelligent, in that moment when we find ourselves becoming afraid, we will choose instead that which restores us to our sense of security. Think of it. We need only to choose the consciousness of Christ, to put on the armor which dispels fear. From this point in your true center of your being, you can look out upon your whole life in this world with a feeling of complete freedom from fear. We know that where the sun is, there is no darkness. The sun does not know anything about darkness, for it cannot experience it being light. The indwelling presence is a being of light, and the person who allies himself with this gentleman from heaven lives in a light of divine intelligence. No doubt or concern can persist there. If a cloud appeared, he would know instantly what to do about it. To live in this light is to live in the kingdom of heaven, which is that state of consciousness wherein you know how to have what you need here and now at your present point of growth. You can never need any more than this, no matter where you are. The fulfillment of these needs are eternal values. They are always available, and they have always been there waiting for you. Chapter 10, Health and Healing Technique. Verse, "And the prayer of faith shall save the sick, and the Lord shall raise him up. And if he have committed sins, they shall be forgiven him. Confess your faults one to another, and pray one for another, that ye may be healed. The effectual fervent prayer of a righteous man availeth much." James 5:15-16. Prayer, as we have seen in former chapters, is man's means of having conscious communion and eventual conscious union with God. He who identifies himself with that which is true for him, his good becomes that which is true. We then come to realize that man's true state, being one of health and well-being, man can come into conscious union with it if he will focus his loving attention upon it. This is his legacy as a child of God. We therefore say that God is the health of his people, and we follow this by saying that good is the health of the children of God who have claimed their sonship. When a man has risen to this spiritual vision, he can then realize his capacity to follow through and claim the full measure of well-being. The metaphysician or spiritual science practitioner agrees only with health as a normal experience for man, whereas the medical physician as a rule does not go this far. In spiritual science, we can find no grounds for agreeing with disease as being natural for man, who is destined to rise above disease and become consciously established in a sense of well-being. To bring this about is one of the aims of spiritual teaching, and we make the statement that it is not necessary for man to learn his lessons by undesirable experience and conditions such as disease. The light of this true way is waiting, and man is equipped to find and understand and use it. The transformation will only take place, however, when man becomes vitally interested in finding such values, lending himself to God's plan and accommodating himself to the process. Health is an aspect of truth of man, a positive good, and is a principle. It is free and authoritative at all time. Principles are never soiled nor diseased, but stand equipped to correct and heal all disease. We come to realize then that disease is a negative, temporary experience of man, subject to removal by the presence of that which is true. When man lapses into disinterest into that which is true for him, he gradually becomes negative and subject to untrue destructive conditions. But when man has been roused to a realization of his own potentialities as a child of God, endowed with the ability to rise above the negative conditions, and once again takes on the character and nature of an intelligent, positive unit, he will then rise completely above sickness, sin, and death, and will know these no more. Health as an absolute value in man's experience possesses the power to correct all disease, but can only become active as a corrective power when man turns his attention toward it and learns how to accommodate to it. Man should include in the thought pattern of his building program the idea that health is a positive good which belongs in as an expectancy for himself. He will then have a confident, victorious attitude which will aid him in arriving at the place where he will enjoy good health. Through the understanding of this principle of health, which represents man's true state, one brings a searchlight of his own conviction to bear on the alien body, and it is redeemed to its normal state of radiant health. Jesus Christ, the great physician, knew all of this, and at all times stood master of those negative conditions, and so was able to operate successfully those who gave their consent. Consequently, he performed many wonderful feats of healing that are frequently called miracles. People call an accomplishment they do not understand a miracle. Jesus understood that what he was doing was returning the ailing individual to a state of normal well-being, bringing about a perfect adjustment within the constitution of the person and bringing him back under the positive law of health. But he invariably instructed his people to go and sin no more. John 8:11. In other words, he instructed them to learn to live in harmony with the law of their own well-being. The truth of health, when grasped by man, causes an activity to take place in the chemistry of his body which dissolves negative conditions, infections, growths, etc., relaxes him mentally and physically, and brings about a state of ease throughout the entire self. This delivers the alien of his freedom, where he is happily related with his growth pattern. This, to be permanent, must be a conscious experience in which the individual has understandingly accommodated himself to that which is true for him, and has become aware of that upon which he is dependent. He will then know the signs by which he may live in harmony with his good. He will know that spiritual science heals all of his negative conditions, thus removing from his experience those disturbing disorders which seem to be the plight of mortal man. He will become spiritually alive, taking on the character and nature of his true being, living triumphantly in true harmony. One's capacity to accept the services of the gentleman from heaven, the great physician, is measured by one's ability to love the truth of health. This may seem like a frivolous statement, for you may say, and is there anyone who is not interested in enjoying perfect health? Unfortunately, there are very many who are not, because they have as not yet found and established themselves with a real health program. They are stumbling around hoping that someone else may solve the problem for them. But health is an individual piece of business, and the individual must attend to it himself. Prayer is his key. Most people pray with a closed heart and receive not. In true prayer, one makes no demands upon God, but is interested in learning how to accommodate to God's plan for man. In learning this, he also learns to love the truth of health, the truth of his good, or whatever kind, and by so doing he becomes open and receptive to it. For that which man loves he gives himself to, and whatever he gives himself to in love is obliged to give itself to him. In this kind of love no demands are made, but there is a willingness to accommodate the true plan. Self-assertiveness and dominance have no part in the art of healing. He who would be healed should be willing to accommodate himself to a plan of health, and this plan of health shall then be revealed to him through his own powers of perception as a result of his seeking. The doors will be opened, and one negative condition after another will be dissolved and removed as though it had never been, and there will remain only that which is true. Each step will carry the person closer to his complete healing, and he will be healed not only in body but also in mind. Through his devotions he will become spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and physically self-gathered and stand in true freedom. The way to freedom is through prayer. The prayer of faith and love constitutes a righteous prayer. This prayer, governed by spiritual science instead of fear and dominance, will heal the sick and raise the dead. Everyone shall by his procedure find his way to his true freedom. Therefore, I suggest that the reader, realizing his destiny, worship at the altar of positive values and so live in the fullness of his inheritance here and now. You can become the conscious embodiment of that which is true for you and enjoy perfect health. For to love health enough is to learn its law, is to become healthy. Treatment technique. Choose ye this day whom ye shall serve. Joshua 24:15. Man has choice in all things, and with conscious, intelligent choice comes responsibility and mastery. Choice, a faculty of the master consciousness, represents the free action of truth. All that man is today, he is because of his choosing. There are two forms of choice: love, which is a constructive choice, and fear or destructive choice. All the things that we have loved or feared, we have taken to ourselves as inner experiences, and they are registered in the subconscious mind and are the mental correlative responsible for the conditions being manifest objectively. These negative correlatives show forth in untrue objective conditions, and all are subject to removal by the presence of truth. Therefore, the individual who will live a life of devoted attention to real eternal values will gradually have all that is untrue dissolved out of his background. Here is where intelligent choice should operate, remembering that to think upon a thing is to touch it, and the things you deal feelingly with you become. It behooves us, therefore, to become good mental and emotional engineers, so that we allow ourselves to think upon and deal feelingly with only such ideas, states of mind, or experiences promise a blessing, leaving everything else alone. This might be thought of as a narrow way, but it leads eventually to a very broad and full experience. Listed below are a few definite steps that one should take in using a technique of healing, or correcting negative conditions. And I might mention here that choice is a masterful act. A master chooses, he does not argue, he chooses a good without taking issue with that which is not good. 1. I choose the conscience of Christ, which is the reservoir of all that is true for me. 2. I choose the principle of perfect health. 3. I choose to be open and receptive to the activity of the principle of perfect health. 4. I choose the realization of this principle as being active through me for me. 5. I choose the ability to experience perfect health. 6. I recognize and appreciate the power of thought. 7. I am grateful that I just know enough to think and work this way. 8. I choose all of this in the name of the Master. Having chosen and carried through in this program, you will have made your contact, and should then realize that the indwelling presence will carry on and perfect the work. This formula of thought, feeling, and action should be repeated frequently, but always with an attitude of confident expectancy toward complete fulfillment. And in this there will be a definite attitude of gratitude toward God as being active in one's behalf. For it is the Father's good pleasure for you to enjoy perfect health, and you are in the process of learning how to accept it and maintain it. Be grateful that you can learn how to accept it, and keep choosing this ability until your needs are taken care of as fast as they appear. Your growth will then become a steadily progressing, joyous process that will bring you the greatest satisfaction you have ever known. Chapter 11, Success in Prayer. Verse, What things soever ye desire when you pray, believe that you receive them, and ye shall have them. Mark 11:24. A story in connection with this idea of believing is of a little girl who lived at home with her parents. They had been praying for rain, and when they were getting ready to go to church, although it was a nice bright day, the little girl insisted on taking her umbrella. The parents asked why, and she said, Well, you have been praying for rain, and God is going to send rain. She was the only one in the family whose faith was real enough for her to act upon it. So many people pray for things, but don't expect to receive them even though they go through the form of asking. Now the Bible verse indicates that this thing you need has literally been placed at your disposal. It is available to you, and you can know what you need to know in order that you may have it. When we ask for something, we must ask expecting to receive it. We must include expectancy then in our prayers, and the first thing we know, what we have been praying for will appear in our world. Before they call, I will answer, and while they are yet speaking, I will hear. Isaiah 65:24. If any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God, that giveth to all men liberally and upbraideth not, and it shall be given him. James 1:5. The glorious thing about prayer is that all are privileged to go direct to God. Here it says you are to ask of God. God, good, is in you. God is the truth of you, and if you turn to your good or turn to God, you will gradually come into unity with God, or your good. God doesn't put you on a scale and weigh you and say, I think you're not quite good enough. I think that you do not know enough, and I think I should not give you this for 1 or 1,000 reasons. No, man has 1,000 reasons why he should not have this particular thing he is asking for, but God has no such reason whatever. It is your Father's good pleasure to give you this thing you need, but in order for you to have it, you have to conform to God's way for you to receive it. That way is the way of recognition, appreciation, and acceptance, or the way of love. God is not interested in your lacks or limitation. God is only interested in your fullness, and you having the abundance of good that you need. Remember, man is an ever-expanding unit of infinite expression. But let him ask in faith, nothing wavering, for he that wavereth is like a wave on the sea, driven with the wind and tossed. James 1:6. Few people have a practical idea of faith. Where you have faith, you really know, and where you know, you help yourself. Where you do not have faith, you simply stumble and fumble around, but where you do have faith, you go to work. Let him ask in intelligence and in knowing. Where you have faith, you are expected to be able to help yourself to your good. A verse frequently quoted is, have faith in yourself before God, Romans 14:22. meaning have faith in yourself to the point of being able to help yourself to your good. The knowledge which gives faith waits for you, and when you learn how to have it, you do have the faith, and you know. For let not the man think that he shall receive anything of the Lord, James 17, unless you have faith, you cannot receive. After all, we only pray where we love. Love is understanding, and understanding is love. Love is unity. If ye shall ask anything in my name, I will do it. John 14:15. That word name is important. It means that if you ask anything in the nature and understanding of Christ, you shall have it, for name means nature. I will do it, for your Father knows what things you have need of before you ask him. Matthew 6:8. The word need is also important. Our needs are quite different from our likes and desires. What you need for growth and progress you are entitled to and can have. It has been prepared for you. It is awaiting your recognition and acceptance. Open your mouth wide, and I will fill it. Psalms 81:10. And all things whatsoever ye shall ask in prayer, believing you shall receive. Matthew 21:22. There are always key words, and if we understand them, we are in fair position to know what we are doing. Here the key word is prayer. Prayer is man's means of having conscious communion with God, or conscious union with his good. Remember, you only pray when and where you love. Now, where you love, you have experience. Where you love, you come into unity with something, because love means unity. It means oneness. If we can learn to love our good, we do come into union with it. Why do we pray? Why does anyone ever pray? We know that from the beginning, long before we had history, man prayed. Where did the idea ever come from that there was in the invisible somebody or something that could help us? There was something in that invisible that would help us, but where did the idea come from? Man feels that he is separated from his good. He feels alone in the world. He feels that he has lost his way. He feels that there is good for him someplace and he should have it. But he does not know how to have it, so he prays. He prays to God or asks God. In some cases, the people who pray to God are thinking of a being. They are asking this being to help them to have a particular thing. This has been the attitude of man down the ages. Of course, men have always asked God to release his wrath upon other people and other tribes, but wrath as it is commonly understood is not God's business. God has nothing at all to do with wrath as the term has ordinarily been interpreted. The wrath of God means the working of truth in us, which stirs up and eliminates from our persons those things that are not true, those things that are sin and error and do not belong in our experience. When you entertain truth as a leaven in your experience, something is going to happen. Things will be stirred up and moved out and rearranged, and that rearranging process is called the working out of the wrath of God. It is really the power of good or spirit working through us and for us. Through the correct understanding of prayers, we naturally come to find a process whereby we may find a way to relate ourselves with God. We find that we have the use of prayer, and that we have a right to use it. We may think that beings alone pray, but we say that prayer is a divine gift to all living things, by which all may reach out and take to themselves what they need for their purpose where they are. We know that things in nature do a pretty good job of attending to their business. The oak tree is interested in a search for what it needs in order to build an oak tree. The palm tree and what it needs to build a palm tree, and so forth. The animals, the birds, and every living thing throughout the entire universe of nature is always attending to its business, that it may take its place and be itself, that it may become what it is destined to be. That drive is locked up in every seed. The carrot does a far better job of being a carrot than the average person does at being a person. If our gardens turned out as badly as some people, I'm afraid they wouldn't produce many vegetables. We expect our gardens to produce good vegetables and fruit, and we would be very much disappointed if they did not. We demand true growth and results of our gardens. Why do we not demand the same of ourselves? We have a tremendous advantage over the garden. The carrot, like all things in nature, does not know that it is a carrot, but a bean knows that he is a bean. He has the capacity for understanding himself as a being, as a thinking being, an understanding being, as one who is capable of understanding who he is and how to be what he is, which lifts him entirely above everything else in nature. You are called upon to understandingly be what you are intended to be, and that is a tremendous step from the vegetable and animal world. By means of beings, God lives consciously and victoriously in his universe. Now then, while the things in nature instinctively reach out and help themselves, we as beings are called upon to do so consciously and understandingly. We are expected to do so from the standpoint of mastery. We are not just instinctively operating units, we are in truth intelligent beings. Here's another interesting word, intelligence. Now the universe is intelligible. That is, it can be understood by intelligent beings, but it is not intelligent. Beings are intelligent. They have the capacity to understand the universe. They express themselves by means of intelligence. Every divine idea in the consciousness of a being is a unit of intelligence, and that unit we think of as a principle. Every principle contains within itself the entire science of its own fulfillment, and you as a person can be taught by that principle. That principle can reveal to you its purpose, its character, its nature, its worth, all about itself. It can impart to you the science by which it expresses. And when you understandingly grasp this science and begin to operate accordingly, then you succeed in fulfilling that particular principle in your immediate experience. The ultimate result is an illumined understanding. Some people expect that somebody, something, or some group of beings, visible or invisible, shall do all their work for them. We are not here to be carried into heaven on feathery beds of ease, as we are used to sing of old. We are here to interpret understandingly the law by which we live in the fullness that belongs to us as a child of God. We are equipped to understand ourselves in relation to the universe, in relation to this planet, in relation to our business, in relation to other persons and all things, for all things are responsive to the intelligently operating thinker. We possess within ourselves the capacity to pray and thereby to come to know what we need to know in order to handle ourselves to advantage where we are. Now that idea holds good whether it is a question of success, health, illumination, companionship, or freedom. Remember, wherever you have a need, you are equipped to know what you should know in order that your need be fulfilled. If we come to understand that prayer is for the purpose of our being taught from within, that it is our means of contacting the law or great teacher within, so we may be taught what we need to know, then we will not be asking God for a nice big red automobile, or $1 million, or a husband or a wife. Rather, we will be asking that we may know how to operate here in accordance with our good, that we may have in our own world everything that is essential to our living a full, opulent, beautiful, satisfactory, and gracious life. This is our heritage. Prayer, in this sense, takes on an entirely different aspect that it is given to by common usage. Prayer is treatment work, and treatment work is prayer. If you really treat for yourself or treat for others, it is prayer. A practitioner is interested, while treating you, in helping you to know what you need to know where you are. This enables you to take the initiative and do the thing that should be done in your world. Unless you do it, so far as you are concerned, it has not yet been done. You must have the experience of doing it. Then what happens? You know something you didn't know before, and you have a conviction you didn't have before. You have a new control. You have a feeling of handling yourself in relation to prayer. And there's not anything that proves more satisfactory for an individual than his feeling that he can do something, that he's not helpless, that he can turn to the great within and know just what he needs to know, how to handle some particular task correctly. Gradually you realize this for yourself, knowing what you need to know. Then you handle your life accordingly. You live a life of conscious control, and you have a right to that. One day we are all going to rise to that measure of dominion. We are going to demand of ourselves the adjustment which brings us into a position where we know we have control. That is an experience, not an intellectual concept, but an experience. So you see, prayer is an experience in which we understandingly grasp the measure of truth essential to the correct handling of a particular objective. There's a fine point here. Sometimes when we have prayed and done our treatment work and then forgotten all about it, we discover one day the whole thing has taken place. The condition prayed for has appeared in the objective world. This is a normal experience. What goes on is that we have consciously or unconsciously accepted the fulfillment of our prayer, and thereafter nothing can stop its eventual fulfillment in the objective world. We are open and receptive to the knowledge essential to the fulfillment of the prayer, and had the experience at the time that smacked of eternal satisfaction. This always means that the prayer will be fulfilled in the objective world, and it follows a satisfactory inner experience without any further concern. You see, our anxiety regarding the fulfillment of a prayer or a treatment is measured by our degree of repetition. If you are making affirmations for success all the time, you are doing it because you don't feel successful. If you are affirming health all the time, then you don't feel healthy. The affirming is not enough to effect the change. It is essential that we learn how to accept a feeling of being successful, or the feeling of being well and vital objectively, that is, in the person. The person must feel objectively the thing that he affirms. Everyone has experienced a measure of success and a measure of health or well-being. These experiences should be recalled and appreciated, and developed by means of happy, devoted attention and appreciation. Remember, appreciation is the divine multiplier, the leaven which develops and magnifies whatever we invest it in. You will not be concerned about the success of your demonstration if in the silent, secret place of your own soul you have come into an inner sense of security in which you have the satisfaction of having come into union with your good. You will then know that you have had an experience by which constructive, definite results have been produced in the causal plane and will be brought through and demonstrated on the objective plane. People who get true results are intelligent because they are working in harmony with the law. Those who do not are a little off point. If you are an intelligent person and have had some measure of success in demonstrating, and then fail to demonstrate, you will say to yourself, all right, I know there is a way whereby I can touch this conscience of good, because it has been my experience before and can be again. Since I know there is success for me, I shall seek and find the way to it by choosing to understand the correct procedure. I will give constant, devoted attention to it, and by so doing will come into union with the law of my well-being. I am going to give God first place. I am going to hold fast to that which I know is good. I am going to love good and love God, coming into a fuller sense of unity, so that I will have good in all the department of my life. In loving good, you are merely being called home for your inheritance. You receive and experience God's love for you with joy, as though it were your first little check of inheritance. In order to receive the rest of the legacy, you have to get in touch with headquarters by means of the correct techniques of prayer. If anyone were told that he had inherited $50,000, given a check for $100 his first installment, and told that if he would do certain things he would receive $1,000 a week for a period of time, I think he would plan to conform to the program of which that money would be delivered regularly. Why would he? Because he would have faith in this matter, and in the bank, and in the process by which all this is carried on. We trust the factual knowledge we have won through a maze of intellectual learning. Why do we not follow through the same way with the spiritual knowledge we gain? Perhaps because we think of a healing as a sort of a miracle that happens once in a lifetime, almost too good to be true. But that's the wrong attitude. Nothing is too good to be true. Of all things that are true, healing is one of them. There is infinite good for you, and you can have it when you learn how to have it, when you learn the system. You learn the system by means of prayer. Live a life of devoted attention toward that which you would have or be. Devotion is love. When and where you love, you pray, and where you love, you come into union with whatever you love and have an experience. It is required of us that we learn to do this. As we have said, a cabbage or a potato or an ox lives instinctively, but you are an intelligent being, and you are expected to see, know, and understand, and follow through and be aware of what you are doing. Then you step out of the land of confusion and come into the clear sunlight of eternal knowing. You see, God grants no favors. Banks have been known to favor certain persons, but ordinarily when one goes to a bank to borrow $1,000, he has to have security for about $3,000 or $4,000, and even then it is sort of a favor for the bank to make the loan. But God makes no allowances whatsoever. He grants no favors. He doesn't have to. In order to borrow from your bank, you must put up security. But in God's program, you simply have to learn how to relate yourself with God, with your own good. And that is an experience that takes place in your inner self, in your own mind, in your own soul, in your own experience, and it is for you to know that you are equipped to do so. But you may say, well, that's a lot of hard work. Well, maybe it is. Let us take this position. You are an adult, intellectually alive and alert. You have risen to a place where you are now able to understand spiritual values. Just think back over the ages and imagine all the difficulties you have come through in order to arrive at this particular place. Because you see, you are now at the very door of heaven. You are now hearing the call of real freedom. Everything that you have ever done through the ages has been instrumental in bringing you to this particular place. And a lot of it wasn't very nice. But today you find yourself at the very door of the kingdom of heaven. You are being invited in, and you are being asked to learn the password. You are asked to learn how to enter into the kingdom and live there, which means to be able always to have what you need where you are. It may take a little time. Suppose you spent your entire time on this earth, say the next 50 years, learning to do this. It would be worth it, because you see, whatever you learn in truth or in reality, you never have to learn again. What a wonderful idea it is that we today are equipped to know how to live in the kingdom, and to know where we are. That means we will never have to do it again. We know where we are on the path. In knowing this, you are taking conscious direction regarding yourself and that which concerns you. Therefore you shall have dominion over everything which concerns you. You will never again think in terms of lack. Never again will you think in terms of separation. You will always be thinking in terms of being able to have what you need where you are. Why should we not bend our every effort to accomplish this particular piece of work? Of course we have to work, we have to eat and sleep, and we have to take care of business and do all the things that pertain to everyday mundane living. One day, however, we have to lay down the relative things we struggled for and forget about them. We must die to them. We think we don't have time to learn how to live and enter into the kingdom. We would like to do it, but we haven't time. That is old mortal mind, don't you see? It defeats itself, telling itself this story. Don't you believe it? What we must do, and eventually will do, is to arrive at a place where we'll have a full realization that the only thing that is worthy of our attention, of our love, our time, our interest, or our substance, is that which has eternal worth. One of our statements is, the only substance recoverable to man is that substance invested in real and eternal values. You never lose that. But someday you have to walk away and leave whatever of your substance you invest in the relative. By relative, I mean all of your inordinate desires, all of your unholy actions here, all the things you give yourself that you wear down and break your health, all of the things that tire you and make you nervous and ill and miserable, and even cart your body off to the cemetery. If these are the things to which you are giving yourself and devoting all your purpose to getting, they must be laid down with the knowledge that they are not important. The important thing is that we shall arrive at a place within ourselves wherein we make all these things serve and help us in our spiritual development, help us to an intelligent, conscious sense of control and mastery. What good is all this if it does not help us find our way to the kingdom? It has value only to the extent that it does this. If you follow through on this program, you are playing fair with yourself and cheating mortality of another victim. By following through on your spiritual program, you will become objectively, spiritually self-conscious, which means you will be objectively, consciously immortal, and you will know who you are and always know how to be that, right where you are. Then what happens? Then you find all things responsive to your call. They are responsive to your will because everything is responsive to the intelligently operating being. The intelligent one knows that he has dominion and realizes that he can have what he needs, whatever he is, and have it without struggle. Man does not need to fight. He only needs to know. Chapter 12. Love Heals All. Error is misinterpretation of the truth. When we are functioning in carnal mind, we get the wrong answers. Metaphysics presents the process by means of which error is destroyed by truth. Truth does the work, but how does the person embody truth so that it functions through him for him? He first searches out fundamental principles, invites them into the house of his being, harbors them there, and feeds them on love as honored guests until they abide with him. That which is untrue cannot enter into union with that which is true. That which is true in you is immortal, and there is sufficient immortality in each individual to guarantee his eternality. In the process of imbibing the truth, the only thing that individual loses is that which is not his good. So it would appear that from the standpoint of sacrifice, the only thing that is given up is that which is untrue and should be unwanted. That is the crux of the matter. Do you just think you don't want untruth, or are you harboring it because you choose in your secret self to do so? Truth and untruth cannot know each other. Truth cannot know untruth any more than light can experience darkness. God therefore cannot know suffering. His eyes are too holy to behold sin. Thou art of pure eyes and to behold evil. Similarly, evil, or carnal mind, cannot know truth. He imbibes and becomes truth, because by the time he grows into an understanding of the truth, he is no longer carnal man. When light and darkness meet, light obliterates the darkness. When truth and error come together, truth dissolves the error. Until we arrive at the point where we recognize spiritual values, they do not exist for us. Christ does not exist to the person who is not awakened to his reality. Truth does not exist for the person who is blind to it. Paul said, "I die daily," 1 Corinthians 15:37. He died to the world. The old man was being done away with, and the new spiritual man was being resurrected. Every time you lay down the limitations of mortal consciousness and take up the glorious spiritual consciousness, you die to the world. When a person is spiritually alert, he finds a way whereby he can come into the inheritance that belongs to him as a child of God. There are many people in the world who look upon what we value as being foolish, visionary, simple-minded, our words mere platitudes carrying no dynamic meaning. That is because they cannot comprehend reality beyond these words and ideas. They have no sense of value for the reports even of well-trained inner-life people whose experiences are authentic. People have a sense of value where they have been trained to recognize it. The sensitivity for spiritual value is sometimes that is a part of a natural growth of man, and can be developed by the true seeker at any time he chooses to turn his devoted attention to it. This usually takes place when he finds that the material world has failed him and he realizes the futility of the world-minded program. When you have a wonderful inner experience during your spiritual growth, you will be wise to be very careful in whom you tell them, for there are very few persons who can appreciate and honor them, and many who will ridicule. You will do well to keep your inner experience to yourself, appreciate them and mature their growth, but do not talk about them. One day you will be manifesting them in your living. Then they will become facts that the unredeemed person can recognize. These experiences with truth sometimes fill us with so much enthusiasm that we are tempted to bubble over. We long to share them with others, and we run ahead of ourselves in our growth program. It is better to keep your inspiration, love, and immediate living program close together, bringing it all into focus within, right where you are on your way to redemption. This is one of the highest forms of concentration, which is the ability to pointedly and harmoniously focus your attention upon the object of your choice. You bring the intelligent into focus. Then you deal harmoniously and feelingly with the object of your choice. It is then vitalized and becomes alive, active, and productive in your objective world. Someday you are bound to have the experience of having some principle come into focus spiritually, which you appreciate and vitalize with your love and interest to the point where it bears fruit for you automatically and instantaneously. This is the sort of living you must look forward to and cultivate by your expectancy. Then one day you will catch up with it and discover you do live that way. Love heals all. Love makes no demands. Many people have become acquainted with this truth through the reading of Drummond's book, The Greatest Thing in the World. They felt that love should be the governing power in the world and therefore asked that it be incorporated in their daily lives. That started something. It invited a dynamic force to become active in themselves and everything that concerned them. The basic principles or virtues are quite like people in that which they operate on the basis of being appreciated. A principle will never impose itself upon you. It may knock at the door and ask to come in, but it will not put its foot in the door and force its way in. In fact, it requires an invitation. So you must treat these principles in all respects as you would wish to be treated. Consider them guests in your home. Then you will discover that they adhere very closely to you. Wherever they are appreciatively entertained, they stay and become alive, active and productive. Something starts working in you when you come to the point of recognizing these basic values. In the teaching situation, ideas are expressed that cause a feeling of approval or disapproval to rise up in the listener. This means that by hearing the words, a certain idea or principle is awakened in the listener, and he has a feeling experience. That is a sign that the principle is there, and must then be entertained and fed in order to become strong, vital, and productive in its world. The reason so much stress is laid upon one's getting an understanding of a principle is because it is the first quickening step in the whole process. The speaking of the word that has this quickening power does not have to take place as an outer experience by a teacher in the flesh, but can occur as an inner experience, the word spoken silently by the gentleman from heaven. God is love. Therefore, love is omnipotent. This is the one power that has no equal. Love in its wholeness means complete understanding. Love understood is the power that works for righteousness. So it is inevitably a great healing power. We need to understand this word love in its broadest sense. In Revelation it speaks of the 7 vials and the 7 plagues. Now people think of these vials and plagues as a sort of punishment that is being sent upon the world by an angry God wishing to destroy us. They are supposed to contain the wrath of God. But this word wrath, when decoded, means love. This gives the whole situation new meaning. The 7 vials of love are to be poured out into the world consciousness of materialism one at a time. These vials of love represent healing agents active in different phases of materialism in the experience of the individual and eventually of all mankind. The result of the purifying action of these correctives is true spiritual healing. So Revelation teaches us that love is a great healing power for the nations as well as for the individual, and will eventually redeem all persons. When these 7 vials have done their great transforming work, all materialism will have been subdued, and the world will have become the kingdom of heaven. The purifying, integrating, and unifying qualities of love make it the healing power par excellence. Love is the true answer. It is a true way. Love illumined is complete understanding, giving complete dominion. Where there is complete understanding, there is always unity, harmony, sameness. Love means sameness, oneness, unity. When we experience difficulty, it is because we are not living the right way lovingly. We must love the object of our love just for itself, not for what it can do for us or may give us. We must love God for His sake, not for ours. To know what a wonderful power love is and to understand its potentialities is to come into union with it, to become it. You know God by being God. You know health by being health. You know security by being security. You know love by being love. In love there is no condemnation, but always an easy, happy, harmoniously working understanding. In accepting love as a healing agent, we must be ready to acquiesce in its behalf at all times. We must let it take the lead and be happy to receive instructions from it. When we experience trouble, it is because we do not correctly know what love is. Therefore we say, teach us this true love so that we may become the conscious embodiment of it. In this way, one places oneself subject to correction, subject to teaching, and gradually changes take place. If you will do this, one day you will discover you are living a fuller and more radiant experience, and things that used to bother you have disappeared. Then you will know what real gratitude is. Someone has said there is only 1 ounce of gratitude in the whole world. Anyway, there is not as much as there should be. Gratitude is the divine multiplier. When you rise in gratitude for the truth you have found, it increases. The incense of gratitude and praise builds up, strengthens, and expands the action of that for which you are grateful. So practice this art of being consciously and wholeheartedly grateful for whatever measure of truth, love, health, and well-being you find. Rise in gratitude within yourself. In my early experience, this line came to me. I sing a silent song of praise and gratitude. If you can train yourself to sing a silent song of praise and gratitude for the truth you have found, it will become vital, active, and productive in you. Love as an aspect of God may be thought of as a candle in the temple of our Lord, but a candle which is not lit does not give light. Light it, and it serves all within the house. It remains out of service until lit or understood. You light the candle when you understand the principle. The candle has all the potentiality for giving light, but until it is lit, nothing can happen. However, in finding the principle and becoming aware of it, we do not make them active. They only become productive in our experience when they are understood. If you can say, I have been aware of these principles for a number of years, but in looking upon my life today, I do not see the fruits of these principles, then you should ask the question, why do I not find spiritual fruitage in my experience? The answer would be, because I do not understand them. I have the candles, but in the dark because I have not lit them. Reason then says to be intellectually aware of a truth and unable to use it, it makes of that truth a liability. Then if you will endeavor to do something about getting the understanding which will illumine the principle, or light the candles, your house will turn from one of darkness, or a glimmering twilight, to one of bright sunshine at noonday. For these principles, well understood, will give off light that is glorious and fully adequate. We speak of it as the Christ consciousness. It represents all the principles understood, all the candles lighted, the house full of light. That light and understanding is available for each one of us, and it is for us to claim it and learn how to accommodate ourselves to it, that we may live in the glory of it. Eventually all that is mortal shall be handled, and the truth of man, the God, good of man, shall be established upon this earth. Your body, mind, and soul is a temple of the living God, and the livingness of God shall fill every cell of your body, and you shall be every whit whole. Every portion of your being shall be radiant with the light of spiritual understanding, and consequently you will be strong, vital, and free, and all your faculties will function properly. So spiritual healing results in physical healing, and physical healing indicates spiritual healing. It is for us to expect the fullness of this salvation, this great change in which we become a new creature in Christ. You can bring about the adjustment that lifts you to this state. It is important for you to think of yourself as a spiritual being. I, the Christ, stand the conscious embodiment of truth understood. I shall serve you in every department of your true building. For I am the builder of the temple of your God. What I build shall stand. All else is a dream which fadeth away. Think of yourself as a spiritual being, consciously immortal, and recognize that it is your privilege to become that objectively. Chapter 13. Suggestions for Daily Practice. When we live a life of devoted attention to the revealed truth within ourselves, we will come into our freedom. Practice the art of being consciously and wholeheartedly grateful for whatever measure of truth you find, and so multiply the action of the truth through you, for you. Do not think to find God through action, but rather through becoming. Remember that the glorification of God is dependent upon the comprehension of man, for man alone is equipped to find and understand God. Before you get up in the morning, make peace with yourself, and choose to have the Christ consciousness active in all your affairs. Develop the practice of thinking of all persons as spiritual beings, ignoring the negative expressions as none of their business. Remember that everyone is doing the best he can with the light he has where he is on the path. This will free you of all condemnation and develop true compassion, which is the ability to serve regardless of seeming worth. Give up all struggle, remembering that resisting evil gives its power over you, which otherwise it does not have. Plan your days so that there is plenty of time to do everything graciously which needs to be done. To determine the needfulness of your activities, write down a list of them, with the one at the top that represents the greatest spiritual value for you, and so on. Remember, a master never hurries. Hold as your goal true mastery over your personal self and all that concerns you, completely free from the slightest taint of dominancy. Remember, we are as strong as we are gentle, as weak as we are dominant. Keep your growth stimulated by thinking each morning, now here is another great day in which I am going to be able to live not only the truth I have found, but also a new measure of truth I shall glean today. Say to the sleeper who is your outer self, awake and know that there are deep within your being far greater powers and resources that you have ever experienced, that there is within you the essence of all that has ever been manifested in a human being, that you can, if you will, be the master, not the slave, that there is a way for you, that all life, seen and unseen, is conspiring to assist you, and that when you are so arranged your life and become conscious of your purpose, then and only then will these forces be able to assist you. Let your prayer be, teach me true love, that I may become its conscious embodiment, and announce its presence and power through harmonious living, radiant health, and abundant supply of all good. In your silent period, which should be set at a regular hour, preferably in the morning, endeavor to set your person entirely aside from your consideration and turn toward God, losing yourself in the love, harmony, and strength of God. Give yourself as completely as you can to God, and in doing so, forget about your body. You will then gradually discover that you have entered into an inner place in consciousness in which you feel perfectly free, secure, and joyous, but this will be balanced, controlled, subtle joy. Stay in it a minute or two, and then accept the fullness of this in your objective world. Then turn your attention on your body and expect that same security, that same freedom and joy in your immediate experience. Keep this up as a practice, but do it only in ease and freedom, never under stress or anxiety. Such activities are accomplished outside of struggling with joy. In these experiences you have a visit, a quiet, lovely visit with God as an indwelling, healing, and redeeming consciousness of good. Do this once or twice a day, and it will become a cherished experience. You will not allow anything to interfere with it. In fact, you will soon find that the gentleman from heaven will remind you of the appointed hour. It will be like a call to a rendezvous. Say the following statement of being feelingly 2 or 3 times a day, aloud or silently, and gradually your good will move in and displace the negative. I am a self-conscious, individualized manifestation of God, infinite goodness. I am endowed with the character and nature of my Father, Mother God. This is my only legitimate hereditary influence. This guarantees my well-being at all times under all conditions. Every atom of my being is a point of divine intelligence. Every cell in my body is alive with the life of God. I am therefore a radiant manifestation of divine life, love, and power. The pearl of great price is within. You can find it. Your destiny lies in knowing the gentleman from heaven. End of chapter, end of book. This audio presentation of The Gentleman from Heaven by James E. Dodds has been brought to you by AudioEnlightenment.com. Copyright 2014. All rights reserved.